favor?
Aye.
So the first thing we're going to take is the Water Resource Committee, mitigation policies. Excuse me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, how are you?
Good, how you doing tonight?
Thank you. So I'm Becky Malamet. I'm the chair of the Water Resources Committee. This is Martha Cook. She's our vice chair. So we just wanted to come to you tonight and give you some information on a policy we're looking to put forward before the Board of Selectmen. We're really looking for feedback, comments, what you think about it. It's a water offset policy. Kind of want to start with giving you an introduction on the committee itself, what we do, and then we'll go into the proposal and get some comments and feedback as it comes up. So we're advisors to the Water Commissioners, the Board of Selectmen. We work very strictly in an advisory role. We provide input on developments, particularly those that fall within the Water Resource Protection District. We were also assisted planning in developing that bylaw, that piece of the zoning bylaw, the Water Resource Protection District. We work with the North and South Rivers Watershed Association on some of the work that they do in town, stream flow targets, providing water for herring flow out of the reservoir, and on some educational outreach as well. Well, we also provide feedback to the Water Department and the Department of Public Works on water-related issues. We've also hosted some educational events at the Water Department and at the library, and have supported the Water Department at the Science Spectacular over the last few years. And our website offers water conservation tips as well as links relevant to the town and water resources, and state resources, I'm sorry. So some of the background on this proposal that we're going to present to you today is, you know, with the drought that happened a couple of years ago, it became very clear that we got much too close to running out of water. And we are looking for some solutions on how to put some water back into the water system, as well as how to plan better for future development in town. So we're also bumping up against our water withdrawal permits that are awarded through the Water Management Act that DEP awards us. So again, we want to allow some more space for development. We want to make sure we've got enough water to do that. So the town, in time, is working on developing an updated study of the water system to really understand how much water we can produce on a daily and annual basis. So we've got a withdrawal limit that we're allotted through the Water Management Act, but that doesn't necessarily reflect what we can actually produce. So that's something that the town is working on. The last time we had a similar assessment done was 2003. So, you know, clearly there's been a lot of development since then. And a lot of work on the wells as well as the reservoir. So we're kind of waiting for those numbers, but in the meantime, as I said, we've been trying to figure out ways to effectively put water back into the water system. So we have this water offset or mitigation policies. So you see them a lot out west in California, New Mexico, Arizona. There are a handful, more than a handful of towns in the Commonwealth that do it. Most of them have been required to do it as a result of over withdrawing water from their Water Management Act permits. So we would be doing it on a voluntary basis as a way to, again, plan for the future. So let me kind of run through some of the key decisions that need to be made and key elements of the policy. And again, any questions or feedback you have as we're giving the presentation, please don't hesitate. And also, it's worth mentioning, so we're presenting this to a number of committees, again, to get feedback, and then we'll present it to the Board of Selectmen. We've worked really closely with the Water Department and the Department of Public Works. We've worked with a number of other towns to understand how these policies work well and how they also have not worked well. And we also worked with a national organization called the Alliance for Water Efficiency, who helps towns and communities nationwide implement these types of policies to get some advice. So the recommendation is a 2-to-1 offset in order to protect future supply. So for example, if a project is going to increase demand by 260 gallons per day, we'll require that the developers offset 520 gallons per day someplace else. And we'll talk about how that happens in the future, in a little bit. So we're looking at a fund-based program. So under this program, the developers would pay a mitigation fee. So it would be a fee that is for each gallon per day increase that is projected with this development. The fees will go into a very specific fund that the water department runs that can only be used for water conservation projects. So some of the projects we looked at are conservation, so retrofitting municipal and residential buildings with low-flow fixtures and things that will stick around for a while, not like low-flow faucet aerators or things you might need to replace regularly. Smart meters, is something we've been trying to do in town for quite some time to allow for more regular reading of water meters and hopefully have a more significant impact on people's water use. Leak detection, which is a huge issue for us in town. We're supposed to be, well, that's not important, but it's a big issue for us and it can be costly and it's not something that the water department has a lot of extra money to look at. Exploring new water resources, so there's a well field that they're looking to explore, the Dolan wells, and there's the reservoir project, which you may or may not have heard about. We're looking to increase basically storage of the reservoir so we can help fund things like that. Gray water reuse in municipal buildings, rainwater catchment, cisterns and storage pumps for schools and municipal fields. And then some feedback we got from the planning board was also funding some educational programs around conservation. So the goal is that the water department would allocate the funds in 1 year, and that we would have an annual spending plan so that we can see dollars that come in, how they're allocated, and when they're spent. So this will give the water department flexibility in the planning and implementing of different projects. The downside of this program is that there are a couple of towns in Massachusetts that have tried to implement water offset policies using this fee. And they have been kind of shot down, and they were implemented and then litigated against because it looked like a tax. So we have to be very specific in how this fund is collected and how it's identified as a user fee, most likely, as opposed to what we now pay as a connection fee. We've also been working with town council to make sure all that language will be strong and hopefully help the policy implement in a very smooth manner. This fee should represent the cost of adding 1 gallon of water in our system. So the water superintendent, Sean Anderson, is working on that number. Most of the numbers we see are around the $5 to $6 range. I have seen them as high as $10. And to give you a sense of what that costs.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Is that per gallon?
So it's per gallon per day. So to give you a sense of what that costs, so if it's a $5 charge, let's say if I have a 4-bedroom house, and using this 2-to-1 offset and the Title V assumption of 2 people per bedroom, and also 65 gallons per day. That's kind of the
Per person.
per the person with the Water Management
yeah.
Act. So that comes to $5,200 for a 4-bedroom house. So that would be the additional fee that you would need to pay.
$5,200 for your water?
No, to build a house.
No.
Just-
The
Oh,
developer.
Yeah, it would be part of one of your fees in your fee schedule that you would have to pay in order, before you hook up to town water, basically.
Right.
All right,
The
it's a
developer.
one-shot
It's a
deal.
one-shot deal.
Yes.
Exactly.
See, I'm
Exactly.
just-
Sorry about that.
No,
Yeah.
actually, we're trying to avoid raising water rates. This would put the responsibility on the developer because for every housing unit that they bring in, it's taxing our
Yeah,
water
no, I
system.
know.
So it helps
Yep.
them bear the cost.
Okay, I just,
So right now, the town charges, I think it's $6,500
For a connection.
for a connection.
You still need to pay that.
So
this is
then it would be
separate.
the 65 plus,
Exactly.
Right.
Whatever.
Right.
So one of the other things we're looking at too is, something we've kind of gone back and forth about is exemption. So exempting smaller developments. There are some towns, and most towns actually in Massachusetts, there are no exemptions. So anytime you're going to add basically a bedroom, so it could be a renovation, it could be a small home, anytime you're going to add additional water use, you need to pay the fee. One of the other things we looked at is we would exempt anything that creates less than 100,000 gallons per year of additional demand, and that's about a 2-bedroom house. So it's something I'd love to get your feedback, just as townspeople and as the Conservation Commission, on what you think.
so you're
people
saying
might
a
be amenable
2-bedroom
to.
house may not pay a fee at all?
Would not have a fee, right? There are
Yeah,
some
we're
other
considering
areas.
that. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then, so there are other, Danvers does it based on units. So they exempt developments that are less than 3 units. So there are a number of different ways to go. I've also seen exempting anything less than 10 units, so.
So when you mention that you're adding a bedroom, that there would be a fee, is that to an existing house? If you add a bedroom, there's going to be this fee?
So if
Maybe.
we look at this, if we do
Potentially.
it based on if the projected demand, if we do it based on this additional gallons per year, right? If we say that anything under this X, You wouldn't need to if it's just one bedroom. But if there are no exemptions, then yeah, anytime you add any additional water use to the system, you would need to pay the fee. So it could be a renovation or a single-family house.
Again, in some communities, they've already exceeded their maximum allotment of water use. We are fortunate, we haven't done that yet, so we're trying to be proactive. So in a community where they're already going over their allowance, that would be more likely. Because we're trying to be proactive and look down the road in the future, knowing that there are already permits in the pipeline, we're thinking this is for a larger thing, a typical 4-bedroom house, a development of 5 4-bedroom houses. Because, again, given how the Title IX laws go, and if you assume that a 4-bedroom house has at least 4 people in it, and those 4 people are using their 65 gallons per person per day, that becomes a significant tax on our system.
But there's also an equity issue, right? So why should, if the goal is to offset water use, why should I not have to pay to offset my water use because I'm only building a 1-bedroom house versus someone who's building a larger house? We're all putting an additional demand on the system. So it's really something we've been very back and forth about in the committee, and would love your feedback,
Right.
whether it's now or shoot me an email, because it's something we've been struggling with.
Well, we don't want to get stuck on that piece, so why don't you
Yeah,
keep
no,
going?
No, that's a
Okay.
long-range thing, yeah, exactly.
Well, no, it's actually not. I mean, so that's part of why we're presenting it.
We
too,
don't need an
'cause-
answer tonight, is
Right,
what
I
right,
get it,
right.
yeah.
So the other big piece is where the policy lives. So our thinking is that it will live in the water department's rules and regulations. So basically, developers, as I mentioned before, they need to pay the fee before they're allowed to hook up to town water supply. So it would be in the fee schedule, and the detail, so there'll be a item in the fee schedule that would say water offset fee, and you have to, the water department have to sign off on it. The details of all of this, as I mentioned, would be in the water department rules and regs, which is something, again, that hasn't been updated since the 90s, so it'd be nice to update it. There are other options of going through bylaws, which would just be a much lengthier process, might not capture as many new, whether it's developments or homes, as we had hoped. So yeah, I mean, that's a basic policy that we're hoping to implement. And so it's, again, that's 2-to-1 offset mitigation fee that's based, I don't have that number yet, but it'll be based on the cost to basically treat 1 gallon of water per day. And then that money would be used strictly for conservation projects within the water system.
So just on the 2 to, and I'll let other folks go, but, so on the 2-to-1 replacement or whatever, how would you propose for that to happen?
So, right now, the planning board and the water department used kind of different figures to understand projected demand for new developments. But generally, they use Title V. So if it's a 4-bedroom house, they assume 2 people per bedroom.
Right.
And then you would do that at 65 gallons per day. So there would be kind of a worksheet. And the thinking is that it would go into that either the developer will put it in, put their projected use into the letters and into their plans that are then submitted to other boards for review. And the water department would then check that number to make sure it's correct. And if they haven't provided the right number, the water department will provide the number with the associated fee.
But still, how would someone come up with a 2-to-1 replication for water? I mean, like, we do it with wetlands.
Right.
If someone's gonna disturb a
Right.
piece of wetlands, they have to have area on their property that they can
Okay.
create wetlands, so.
Sorry, so that's the fee.
Similar.
So it's,
Yeah.
well, so it's money. So one of the options and some in other towns, what they have the developers go out and actually implement projects that actually put water back into the system, so similar with wetlands. But with the fee, you just pay. So I've determined I have this many bedrooms, people, it's gonna use this many gallons of water per day, times 2, times the mitigation fee, and then you pay that fee. And then the water department will use that money to fund the other projects. So it's not exactly a 1-to-1 gallon offset, it's a 2-to-1 with a dollar.
So if I'm understanding it correctly, this isn't to create a new source of water. You're leaving that to the water department to do.
So we're leaving it to the water department to decide how to best spend the money, what projects will make the biggest impact. So it could be to fund this finding new resources, it could be retrofitting old buildings. A lot of towns do rebate programs, the Hingham does a rebate program where residents can get lower flow toilets, so that's one option. But we also realize that there could be bigger projects that could have a bigger savings, especially leak detection in our town, and the smart meters could be a big one. So basically, the long answer is that it would be up to the water department to determine how to best use the money, but they would have to show the water commissioners and the Water Resources Committee how the money is being used.
They have a long wish list, and they would prioritize what is the most urgent, and where they need the funding to be placed, that where it would do the most good. Again, in terms of leak detection, leak repair, things that would quickly actually save the loss of water.
Yeah. And it'd be very specific, the fund would be set up in a very specific way that the money could only be used, again, for conservation,
that.
putting water back in the system, so that it doesn't look like the water department's just getting an extra funding stream to do it, whatever they, and it can't be used for any operational costs.
Yeah.
Penny, you wanna-
No, I don't know that question.
Paul?
No questions.
Nothing?
Jen? Amy, do you want to add anything to this right now? No, not right now. So I guess we'll take some copies and
Sure.
take a look and try to get back to
That'd be
you,
great.
maybe through Carol or
That would be
Amy.
great.
We'll put together some kind of response.
That would be fantastic. I'll send over some, kind of the talking points
Right.
for you to review.
Yeah, it would be helpful to know how some of these pieces are going to be offset. You know, the idea that if someone's building a more user-friendly property would pay less than, same thing with a gas guzzling kind of thing, or a fuel consumption. I mean, right now, when we build a new house, we have to go through an energy rating piece, and if you're very energy conscious, you get points. If you're not,
Right.
you don't, if, at some point, you don't even get a building permit if you're not conserving enough energy. So
Right.
there's a whole process for that. On the same token, if you do those things, you actually get a credit back to help
Yeah.
pay for a lot of those.
Yep.
That. So it's a pretty complicated setup, but it does encourage people
Absolutely.
to try to do the right thing with their property.
So that's something we're actually looking into doing. There's a town in Acton, they do something similar where you can either present your plans using Title V and figure out what the fee is, or you can work directly with the water department to look at lower flow fixtures and figure out how to reduce the demand of the project, and then you would get a credit toward mitigation fees. So it's that same idea. I think we're just, yeah, so it's that same idea. We haven't quite figured out how that would work. I think the water department is ready to kind of take on the basic program, but I don't know that they're ready for that level of detail. But if you think that that's something that would be an integral part of it
I
being
think
a
it's
successful
important.
program, yeah.
You know, there's a lot of different costs that come onto a new house, or possibly even an addition today. People are trying to do that, and, you know, we can make an assumption that these are all large homes with lots of amenities, but that's not necessarily the case, you know?
Right.
People are trying to find something more modest, or maybe do an in-law apartment or something like
Right.
that. And, you know, you add one fee and then another fee, and, you know, we have things to deal with stormwater. By the time you add up all those fees, it's not 5,000, 10,000, it could be getting into $25,000 or $30,000 for someone to add on to their cost to build a home or whatever. That's a lot of money.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and we're aware of that. We've debated this back and forth for months in committee, and we wouldn't want to penalize anybody.
yeah.
We're considering, you know, a 200-unit development going in is going to really add a lot of
Sure.
stress to our water system. And in some communities where this is already existing, they can do a quick guesstimate that 50% of the toilets are pre-1970. So those toilets all use more gallons than necessary. So a developer would go through, and people can sign up for a voluntary replacement of an older toilet that uses more water, and the developer would be responsible for retrofitting them with a new low-flow toilet. I mean, our schools all have, excuse me, the older schools have older toilets.
Yeah.
And so they use more gallons per flush than is really necessary. A developer could go in and put low-flow faucets, low-flow toilets, and that would help save a lot of.
Get their credits, same as carbon credits and all that sort of thing.
Exactly, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but we moved away from that idea of having the developers do it themselves, because there's been some concerns about privacy and
Sure.
and
So they
the
would just be
timing.
paying for these things to happen.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
They wouldn't specifically be walking into a homeowner's home to do it. They would simply pay for those toilets to be installed if the homeowner chooses, or the school, or any other place.
And, you know, I think we all realize, like you point out, the drought certainly, hopefully brought that to a lot of people's attention, and they don't
Right.
forget it too quickly.
Right.
That that's a real problem. And the water is a finite supply, so we have to be cognizant of all that.
Right.
You know, at the same time, you know, people that are trying to, no matter how it goes, that cost ultimately, you know, we say, well, put it onto the developer, but ultimately it winds up onto the person
Who's buying.
that's doing that, either building their own
Right.
home or it's in a subdivision or something. So it takes a lot to sort that all out.
Right.
But I think we got some other meeting things
Yeah.
to go on to tonight,
Great.
but if we could
Thank you.
get that, and
Yeah.
we'll certainly do our part to get back to you.
That would be
and-
great. Just any feedback or
Appreciate it.
report or not, that would be great.
Super.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank
taking
you
the
very
time
much.
to do
Night.
that.
Thank you.
Thanks for the work on that, too.
Yeah.
Enforcement order, Bjorgen?
Bjorgen.
Bjorgen. 23 Oceanside Drive. Good evening.
Thank you, Frank. Paul Marabito from Ross Engineering Company. I was approached by Mr. Boyajian, who's the owner of the property at 23 Oceanside Drive. And he provided me with some documents relative to the work that he believes he did receive permission from the state to do the work after the nor'easter back on March 2nd. That was Winter Storm Riley. What I provided to you in an email last Friday in hard copies, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to review them, but just quickly, he was required under the state's order to contact the Conservation Commission, which he did in an email dated March 28, where he describes his intention to import at least 2 feet of fill to repair, stabilize, and shore up his property by backfilling up against the stone foundation of the house. And that was in an effort to prevent future basement flooding and loss of the heat and the hot water equipment in the basement. What he did was to put a lift of 2 feet of fill approximately from the foundation wall out 6 feet, and he put that around the perimeter of the house. The next day, on March 29th, he sent an email. There was an email response to Mr. Boyajian from your agent informing him that she had forwarded his previous email of March 28th to Jim Mahala at the DEP to determine if the extent of the filling was authorized under the emergency declaration. What he did receive later that day, I believe, it was on March 29th, is dated, there's a copy in the packet, was an acknowledgement of emergency repairs following the Winter Storm Riley, which was the signed authorization form from the DEP. That was on March 29th. Then what he did was to proceed with the work. And on April 10th, the enforcement order was issued by your agent. And the reason for the enforcement order was the quote that the installation of the additional material in an AE flood zone without permission, that was the cause for the issuance of the enforcement order. Based upon those documents that was provided to me, I ended by saying that that Mr. Boyajian did properly inform the commission of the proposed extent of the activity on the site. The agent did send the email to the DEP seeking confirmation of the work as proposed. And on March 29th, the DEP followed up by issuing the approval of that document. But with respect to the enforcement order, we believe it's that the issuance of that was premature and it was unwarranted, as the owner did perform the work as proposed and authorized by the DEP. There's a photograph that I did receive in an email from Amy this morning. I don't know if you have that. What it shows is it shows you the house where he put the fill up against the house. He put it up to the windowsill, and he came out approximately 6 feet. This lot had already been elevated on the north side. There's a boulder wall that's along the way, which is called Indian Lane. The property to the north has the same boulder wall. What the owners did, I don't know if Mr. Boyajian did it or the previous owners, but what they did was to elevate the ground around their house, so they wouldn't have as much flood water coming into their property. The FEMA flood zones are on elevation 15 there. I'm not sure what the elevation of the ground is, but my guess is it's probably around 10 or 11. So if you did get a 100-year storm, you'd expect, according to FEMA, to get 4 or 5 feet of water on the ground there. And the houses to the south on Wampatuck Avenue, according to my client, he did say that some of those houses did in fact get water in them because they're fairly low in that flood zone. But the reason for this was to address the enforcement order, and it's the applicant's belief that he did get permission to do the work, and he went ahead and performed it, and he hasn't caused any harm to the neighborhood in doing so. So,
Okay. Not sure, Amy, do you want to address this first? And then we can take some questions from members.
Well, I think that you've all been in the loop. So, the March storms came, and following Winter Storm Riley, the department issued a emergency declaration authorizing certain activities that could do certain work, severe weather emergency declaration for the March 2018 Northeasters. Scituate was one of the towns included. Anyhow, so it was very specific into what you could and could not do as far as post-storm damage cleanup activities and what was authorized. So that came out in March following Riley. And there was a window of about 30 days, which was then extended for 60 days. But around March 26th and through the end of March into the first week of April, the office was alerted that truckloads of fill was being imported onto this property at 23 Oceanside. And this was phone calls and emails from abutters. So at one point, I'm not sure when, but we were notified, police were notified, we checked it out. We asked the owner to come in and talk to us about it, and we talked about, he explained that his basement was compromised by the storms, and he needed to shore up the foundation, and, so anyways, and I said, there is this emergency declaration that if you provide us authorization to the local commission, and also goes to the state, they'll send back an authorization notice, and you should be good. So I think what happened, though, was that there's perhaps overstep of the authorization, the interpretation by the applicant or the owner of the house in what shoring up really was. So, I mean, if you go with the state's description on shoring up, they specifically, first of all, they specifically indicate that the order is to allow for post-storm recovery efforts necessary to protect public health and safety from damage caused. And post-storm activities are limited to but do not exceed what is described in the list below of post-storm activities allowed by this declaration. And it goes on to say that if you're going to do more than what's allowed, you need to file a notice of intent.
Right.
So one of the activities, which he was authorized by the DEP, so there's an authorization that you get back, which I know you've all seen, it's in the correspondence here, it's also in our file. And so you get this form back from the state.
Right.
And literally, they were getting hundreds of these for all the communities that were affected. And the state was getting notifications, and so they checked the boxes. Replacement of sand or cobble material eroded in the storm from a coastal bank, coastal dune, and/or coastal beach. Second box that was checked was repair, stabilize, shore up, but not expand any seawall, revetment, structure, building, or foundation. And so that was the authorization, acknowledgement of emergency repair that he got back. Anyways, so, I mean, clearly from the photos, which I can bring up pictures pre and post, just so we can just look at them with fresh eyes. Because we did receive many photos from the abutters. Here's before, here's after, just a sense of what went on here. But what appears to have happened is that, I'm not sure, actually this would be a good question to ask, was how much material was actually brought to the property. But we've had reports of, half a dozen tractor trailers of earth that came to the property. Surely more than shoring up the foundation. Also, the fact that there was a replacement of sand or cobble that eroded from the storm, I think it's questionable that anything was actually eroded from the property and needed to be replaced. I think that the pre-pictures show that, the level of the ground relative to the basement windows. And after the earth was brought in, it's up to the level of the, basement windows.
Sure.
Yeah.
Penny, you have any questions?
Well, that's, I think a filing needs to have been made for the amount of material brought in and for the board to be given the opportunity, whether it is or isn't allowed. Because I went down there when it was going on, and I definitely feel as though the boundaries were way overstepped from what the emergency order was meant for, what it was supposed to do. You weren't supposed to bring in anything extra. You weren't supposed to make it better than it was prior to the storm. You were just supposed to do emergency repairs, and anything else should have been filed for, and I feel as though that didn't happen.
Okay. Richard?
Similarly, I was there when it first started to happen. I've been by as recently as the last 2 days, and it just looks like a lot more was done than was supposed to be done.
Paul?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like beyond the foundation, the entire grade was raised.
Lisa?
I just want to see the before. I've seen what it looks like today, but I don't have a point of reference for before.
Jen?
I'm good for now.
Richard and I would like to see that.
Yeah, we got it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Actually,
So-
I'm looking at it right here.
I mean, I've been back and forth by the property as well. One of the things that you mentioned, Paul, was to prevent future flooding. My understanding of the declaration from the governor was that the work that was to be done was to protect someone's home or property from damage from the storm. In other words, if you had part of your foundation washed out or seawall directly in front of your house that was damaged, that kind of work could be, you could go to work on that to prevent further damage to your property. And obviously a seawall breach or a foundation that's been exposed, walls that have been broken, people have the, it was probably a good thing that the governor did that and given that declaration. It allowed people to protect their property fairly quickly. However, I think some people misinterpreted or went beyond what was to be allowed by that declaration. The declaration was to try to secure property that was damaged or, I mean, that storm went on for days, and, Oceanside got washed in. Obviously, people want to keep debris and stuff, water from getting into their homes, so I get that. But I think also that there was instances where folks took it beyond what it was intended to be and did work sort of saying, well, geez, this is gonna let me get this work done where I wouldn't have to normally permit it, or even if it was allowed.
Yeah.
And, I mean, what I'm seeing is a house that had, looks like lattice work. I'm not sure what's behind the lattice work, if it's open or closed, but there was a foundation around there that, I don't know if it was compromised. Was it anybody, an engineer, or did anybody look at the foundation and say, yeah, this foundation was damaged and it needed to be blocked up, or it would continue to leak? Do we know that?
I don't know that. I wasn't, I don't know what the site looked prior to the storm. The documents provided to me, as I stated, was that he specifically wrote that email to the commission saying he wanted to put a lift of fill up against the house, 2 feet high and out 6 feet out around the foundation, which he was required to notify the commission under that emergency order. And then the next day, Amy sent it on to the DEP to see if that work was allowed. We don't know what the response was, but the same day, the DEP did send that form back and it was signed. And I think based on that, the owner took that as approval to go ahead and do the work that he had spelled out in the email of the previous day, to put the fill around the house.
Well, we can only, I mean, knowing what was happening during that storm,
Yeah.
it was pretty intense, and I'm sure that with that declaration, I mean, we did that work for different customers. I mean, we put over 500 tons in front of stone in front of a seawall that was collapsing. So we had permission to do that, and we did it. But you had to be fairly clear on what was happening, and there was some, I mean, this seawall in the particular case was falling in. But if there's instances where the work was not really needed to protect that home, and it went beyond the scope of the governor's work, DEP was barraged by these emails. We were notifying them, and they were basically sending out form, type responses saying, we'll deal with it. As Amy pointed out, I don't see that there was any scouring. Certainly there was water around this house. There was water around lots of houses down there.
I mean,
So,
that whole yard was elevated before the storm, according to the owner. All I'm pointing out is that he did write the email, he's very specific. He wanted to go around the house with a 2-foot lift to come out from the house. Purpose was to put the fill up against the bottom of the windows so the water couldn't get into the house. He was very specific about that. The next day, Amy did pass on to the DEP, rightfully so, is, a question as to whether or not that was permitted. What the owner got back that same day was a signed authorization from the DEP. He took that as approval for him to go out and do the work that he spelled out in his email the prior day. And again, he did that once he got the signed form from the state. So having said that, I don't see where he did anything that would have caused the enforcement order to be issued, because he was doing that based upon his response from the DEP. He didn't know
the fill was supposed to be 2 foot high and 6 foot off the house. I'm just looking at the size here, and it looks to me like there's a lot more than 6 feet off this house.
I haven't seen it. I didn't see the site prior to the filling.
Well, it certainly is a lot more than, I mean, it doesn't take a
This
rocket
looks-
scientist to see that it's over 6 feet.
I mean, 6 feet out.
See, I think the issue, Paul, is if he'd done just what he said he was gonna do, there wouldn't probably be a big issue.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
gone
there's
way beyond
There's a
that.
couple of things. You guys just go through this one step at a time. No, yes. It's up to the commission right now to do this. So there's a couple of things. There was a limit of work that was, the commission was notified about. That notice went on to DEP. It appears to me that there's quite a bit more fill than what that notice said, in just in a quick look at this. And then, two, there was a time limit to do this work. So that originally it was a month. The storm was, the 2nd or the 3rd. So everything was supposed to be completed a month later, and then there was an extension of one more month. Beyond that, people were supposed to file to continue to do that work. It seems to me like work has gone beyond that time period. Everything was completed within the time frame allowed by this order.
Yes, it was.
See, everything loomed and done. So, I mean, that to me seems like this part of it, and to the extent that the fill was placed in there, seems to be more than what was allowed.
What's the source of the pictures? I didn't take them.
I don't know where they came from. I mean, we
Are they
can-
dated?
Yes, the original ones came to us from 2016 before.
I mean, we can go through all this, but,
They came from a butters in the emails that are on the pictures.
But how
So-
do we,
yeah, why don't you, here, come and take a look at this, Paul.
Yeah, you should see the pictures, Paul. Before and after.
So Paul, you could actually take that yard, you could take that dimension, right?
see that, yeah?
Yeah, you could figure that out, right? And say that this goes pretty flat all the way out to the road. And then you could survey that lot and tell us how many yards of material were deposited there, and whether that's 6 feet off the house or not. Really, you could. If you can come back to me, you could, almost from these before pictures,
No, I-
you could do an as-built
I see
plan
it, Frank.
and say that, and then you could do an existing plan and show me how much material was there, how far it comes off the house, and how many yards were placed there. Maybe that's what we need to know.
Can you have these sent to me,
Sure.
copies, and I could respond to that?
Yep.
Can I have a response by the next meeting?
Okay.
And I can speak to the applicant as well.
But what we really need, Frank, is a notice of intent in the restoration plan.
Oh. That, you can give us that along, we'll give you the pictures, but I think, because in order to do a notice of intent and a restoration plan, we're gonna wanna have some sort of baseline, and we're gonna have a plan to show what's put there. Right?
So if we have to do an NOI, you have to have that.
I would say you have to do an NOI,
You don't-
not if.
He doesn't have a choice.
And otherwise, I mean, we're glad to go back to the state and ask them for their interpretation on that.
Is that enforcement order going to be ratified?
I don't see why it wouldn't.
Okay. Yeah, it hasn't yet, so,
Okay.
okay, all right,
All right, but we will get you those.
all right, thank you.
Thanks.
Frank, before we move on, I think it's important to let the abutters that have come out just make any points that they want to share with the commission.
Well, we're gonna have a public hearing. I mean, I understand that there's folks here that are concerned, and they wanna, and obviously, we're concerned about it. We're all here. We've seen the information. We're telling Mr. Marabito and his client that we feel that they've gotta get us this information, and there ought to be a public hearing to that effect. And at that time, everyone is gonna get notified. I mean, we can get some input, but I think we have enough right now, honestly, to move this along. You know what we want. We want to hear that. Go ahead.
Okay, well, so the deadline in the enforcement order for the submission has since come and gone. I think
Okay.
we definitely need to impose a deadline for this paperwork to keep it moving along.
All right. So in order to get that survey work, Paul, and get back to us with a notice, can we have that?
I'd probably need 60 days, because we're pretty busy right now. I mean, I've got to go and survey the property.
All right, so no work's going to happen on the property for the next 60 days.
Cease and
Nothing.
desist.
Season, so there's nothing can happen
What you're
there.
saying is that he can't do anything until he
Nothing.
gets...
Nothing.
until he gets approval.
Right.
Right, okay.
Can I see my backyard without being or anything like that? Or just seeding my backyard?
What he's asking, in the back of that house, he's got a separate parcel, vacant land, which is lawn, and some of that got destroyed in the storm, and he wants to reseed it.
Single parcel. It's all one property.
I don't know why he couldn't reseed it to restore it,
Because he raised
put the lawn
Hey,
back.
Is that raised?
We're gonna,
it 8 inches.
excuse me. So I don't think any work can be done there until we get some information. So maybe you guys can find a little more time to get that back to us. But right now, the only thing that I would want to see, though, to be quite honest, is I'd rather see like ryegrass or something. I just think it's going to be a dust bowl. Personally, I think it would be better. This is not going to end tomorrow. And even if they remove a bunch of this stuff, it's going to be a mess. If this were a site that people had done work on, we'd tell them to stabilize it, either by placing mulch over it or something to keep that from being a dust bowl all summer long. That would be my recommendation.
The original date for submission was May 1st, so we're already over a month past that.
Right.
I mean,
So I'm not looking to let them have a lawn here, but I am saying that without doing something there, that
I don't care
this
either way.
could be a mess. I mean, if I were all the neighbors, the last thing I'd want to have is just raw dirt there for the whole summer. Right now, it's mud, but sooner or later, it's going to be dust. And if we were looking for, if someone did work in an area and we were concerned about erosion or sedimentation or anything like that, we'd tell them to stabilize it.
Yeah, we asked them to put a.
They can
erosion
certainly
control
put
on-
erosion control
Yeah.
around it,
On the down gradient side,
which we should be doing.
yeah.
So it should have erosion control, and then they could put mulch on it, to keep it from, mulch meaning like straw or something like that, something to keep
Straw.
this
Oh,
from,
that's a good idea.
Yeah, the straw.
they make a chopped straw kind of thing, something to keep this from being a dust bowl. But we don't want a manicured lawn there, no. I mean, not until we figure out what was placed there and was it properly placed. Yes, sir.
Could he put any ryegrass to stabilize the,
No.
Well,
Soil?
I mean, I would tell someone to do that if there was an area.
I think
Seeding doesn't do damage, you can still remove material that's
I
seeded.
that, but I think
Right.
it's gonna,
It just
we might get
stabilizes.
overstepped again.
Mr. Boyashin.
The area we're talking about is the backyard, and it has nothing to do with the house where the work was done. The backyard flooded, and all kinds of seaweed and storm debris came in.
Sure.
We took out truckloads
Yep.
of debris. Now the land's all raw. Now this is the part we didn't fill. All we want to do is seed it, get a lawn back.
Excuse me, are you saying there was no soil put in the backyard?
Excuse me?
Were you saying that no soil was put in the backyard?
We brought in some soil to cover the sand, about this much. I need to see that picture, because I got pictures too.
We also have.
We brought a truckload of dirt in to cover the debris. I took out 3 truckloads,
Sure.
and all I'm trying to do is get something that's plantable. I had a yard back there, and the storm wiped it out.
Excuse me, sir. He has grass there.
Excuse me, your name,
My
please,
name's Allison Bolger. I live behind him,
and your address?
41 Wampatuck Ave.
Okay.
He does have some grass there. It's not a dust bowl. And the dirt that he placed there is probably 2 feet high. From the back of the driveway, yes, sir, and on the side, it's quite significant.
Right.
And that's when the police had to go and remind the person that was laying the dirt, and he stopped.
Sure.
And also, I have a picture of his yard from several years ago, and that particular part of his yard that he elevated was flat.
Right.
It was,
So I think that's how we're going to wind up deriving some of these pieces. We're asking Mr. Marabito to give us some sort of pre-plan, which is gonna be difficult to do, but given photography and whatnot, and looking at a road, we should be able to come up with some pretty good idea of what was there before. And then we'll take a look at how much material, by giving us an existing plan, we can get an idea of how much material was placed there. So, but this is all gonna take time. And it's not just gonna get removed tomorrow. There's a whole process that's gonna go along with this. If someone went into an area near a wetland or up against a street, disturbed it where they weren't supposed to, we would tell them to secure that property, make sure that no more erosion was happening, that we didn't wind up with additional sedimentation, et cetera. So just trying to figure out the best way to secure this, because by the time we go back and forth on these, and they submit a plan, and we get to look at it, time's gonna go by.
And that's our concern. What's going to happen? How long is this going to take? Which I understand, it's a due process. And our concern is the upcoming winter and how this is going to affect us.
Right.
And we are, as you can
And,
imagine.
and your property is a concern, because people do not have the right to divert proper water or whatever onto other people's property. It's part of the process when
We
we
would
look at
do
that.
it if we could, you know? I mean, we all would.
So it's just the commission trying to decide what's the best process to at least stabilize this until we can get this shook out, okay?
Yeah, I understand.
And my feeling is that it wouldn't be bad to get, even if it's a ryegrass, an annual, and let them seed it with an annual. Like,
But Frank, how are we gonna control that though? I mean, at least the straw, it's something we can really see. You know what I mean?
well, I think if you just say it's ryegrass, it's an annual, it's gonna be dead next year, I know that's difficult to do, but I think it's still gonna be pretty obvious what gets planted there. If he wants to put more of a lawn down, if he goes beyond that and does that, and then at the end of the day, he's removing it, that's his peril. But I think it would be in not only, I think it'd be in the neighbor's best interest to get that stabilized for the time being, because I don't see this material leaving tomorrow. You know as well as I do, by the time we go through this process, Paul gets a plan, it's gonna be a while. You can tell him not to mow it, just plant it, let it grow.
You feel? Tomato.
Right? We're gonna take just a couple, but we got a lot of hearings
I have
tonight.
a very quick question.
Sure, and your name and address.
My name is Carrie Dwyer, and we're at 39 Wampatuck. Could you ideally give us the overview of the high arcing scenario of what would happen with the property now? I know there's a cease and desist. You're saying 60 days to give an LOI or some sort of document of their plan. Could you just give us out a 90 day to 120 day plan? Ideally, if everything goes smoothly.
I mean, once they have an enforcement order to not do anything, and we can give them direction as to what we'd like them to do to at least stabilize it or leave it alone or whatever. We'll determine a date that is acceptable to get the information back from the applicant, at which time we'd have another hearing that you'd be all notified. Typically, we wind up with 2 or 3 meetings to shake that out, and then we give them, they give us, we come to some resolution on what's gonna get changed there, and then that work takes place, which I don't see that happening until the end of the summer. Would be my guess. But I think if we told them to plant it with ryegrass and don't mow it,
Yeah.
I think that's a way to stabilize that yard. And then, do we need any additional erosion control? Do you want a silt sock around that property, or part of it? I'm not sure exactly what's running. I mean, we don't want to see any silt or anything going into the storm drains. Do we need that?
Yeah, what,
I mean, there's a berm around
there's
part,
definitely a direction, that if we go out on a rainy day, we can figure that out, but.
I mean, when I went by, I'm seeing like a berm that's around the property and the rocks on the top of it.
Right.
And in this picture, I'm seeing
Seated.
a berm with rocks on top of the property. In these pictures, I'm seeing just rocks around the property. So I don't know if that berm was added as well.
Oh, right, I think it was, like
So,
the windrow, kind of looks like.
Yep.
windrow. Yeah.
okay.
Frank, the front of that yard, I believe, is already seeded, or it's been hydro-seeded, the front yard. The area behind the house that you're talking about, where the rye seed, where the ryegrass would go, that's the area he's talking about, put the grass back there.
I understand. I think for now, that's the best we can offer. I mean, there's clearly some violations here, in my mind.
So no mow in the front yard,
I just
let it
don't,
all grow,
let it grow until we get this,
yeah,
So just let the front yard grow.
I want it to stay stabilized, that's all.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
We use the property for family reunions and wedding parties and that sort of thing. These events have already been planned and they're about to occur over the summer. The yard that we're talking about in the back, half it is grass already. This other area where the tractors and everything else tore it up, removing everything, is damaged. All I'm gonna do is smooth it out and seed it so that we can carry on these events. I gotta be able to mow the lawn.
So I think that the only way that the commission's going to move from where they are now is if we can get affirmation of what was there before and how much material was there. So I guess that would be between you and Mr. Marabito to figure out how soon you can get back to us and show us that you didn't do anything.
The backyard wasn't done.
Till you can show us that you didn't do anything there beyond what you were supposed to do. And I understand you can put a couple inches of loam to repair that. There was a lot of overwash, rocks, dirt, everything that's got to get scraped out. That's understandable. But if you put 2 inches of loam there, that's fine. If you put a foot of loam there, that's different.
It's 2 inches is all I want.
Well, let's find out
What's there?
let's find out what was there.
You know, but it's the season to do this.
I understand it is.
I just want to scrape it, spread it smooth and seed it.
So we need some sort of information to know what was there and how much is there now.
Would color pictures suffice?
I think Paul needs to take some shots. I think we need some sort of plan.
Hey, he's talking about the backyard area?
I understand.
Okay.
I don't know how to make that go away. Sorry.
Walter did something.
Huh?
Okay.
Do you want
I'll
to
talk to you later. I'm all set.
get us back, get that information back to us, and we'll go from there?
So what are we looking at?
Sooner is better. Can you shorten the 60 days, you know? It would be in his interest.
Well, the notice of intent will take time, but as far as the backyard, if it is what he's describing to me, I think that's something we can get into before the next meeting.
All right.
If it's that simple.
Okay.
Okay.
Wait a minute, say that again?
The backyard, I don't know.
Backyard.
What about the backyard?
Supposed to be
If
outside.
that backyard is just a matter of putting this much loam on it, if somebody hasn't done it yet, and that's all he wants to do back there, then what I'll do is
Already done it.
document that and have it to you by in a
But
week or
that's not
so.
all we're looking for.
No, I know.
No,
He's got to
no.
come up with a whole notice of intent
Oh,
for the
yeah.
filling around this house.
Okay.
There's kind of talking about two things. We definitely want to deal with the filling and things around the house. In the meantime,
That's
are we
another-
satisfied with how that's been stabilized in the front yard? Or do we want to give them any more direction in terms of stabilizing that? And then the second piece is the backyard, and how much material was placed in the backyard, and confirm that there was more or there was not more, or get the backyard back to some sort of level area or pre-existing.
There is a picture of the back, the
Yep.
driveway, and I don't know if it's. in-
Yeah, and they're gonna have to use that to give us that information.
So then, but the entire property, we're not lifting the cease and desist?
No.
Just so I'm clear.
Right, but if they can come back with what was in the backyard, it seems to me like it would be in everybody's interest to get at least part of this cleaned up to some degree and stabilized. So if the backyard can be flattened and seeded and done, that would be great, but we're not gonna go for additional material being placed there. So Paul's gotta give us some sort of a plan that shows that that didn't change.
Right, that he didn't substantially change that grade.
Right.
So you just put a couple inches on the back.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Damian Groge, I live 72 Kenneth Road, I am also in the butter.
Mhm.
And I didn't get any of Mr. Maravito's engineering information. You're splitting hairs. The backyard is what's gonna allow you to get him to get the work done. Because otherwise, he's gonna drag this out, it's gonna stay forever. But one of the reasons why I came tonight is because I did not come when he did 71 Kenneth Road, where he raised it 3 feet, added wall, seawall between the two houses,
Yeah.
and it changed the flood in my house in all 3 of the March storms. But I didn't come then, so I'm here tonight to say that you can't let him do something on the back without holding his feet to the fire.
Okay.
He brought in over 4.5 feet of fill. I mean, if you need to, call the contractor. I mean, there are steps, there are 5 steps up to the front
Well,
door.
we're gonna.
That's gone.
We're
So-
gonna, excuse me,
So if Mr. Maravito can figure out how much this is.
that was part of
But what
the,
I'm saying is you can't say, we'll let him do the backyard and then we'll hold his feet to the fire in the front. It's 1 yard, it's 1 lot.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
you got it, thank you. Crowley, 15 Kane Drive, repair septic.
What was that one, Paul?
Cane Drive. Javier,
We'll make it quick.
we know you.
On June 4th, 2018, during the 6:15 meeting, the town of Scituate will hold, Conservation Commission will hold a request to Joan Crowley for determination of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Scituate Wetlands Bylaw to repair a septic system on property located at 15 Kane Drive, Scituate. Abutters and other interested parties are invited to attend. Good evening.
Phil Spath, Spath Engineering. All we're looking for is an RDA, we're putting a repair system. The existing system at 15 Kane Drive sits in front of the house, is here, and a D-box
Hey, Jeff, can you shut that door? Thank you.
and leaches to the front of the house. In this area, dealing with high groundwaters, it's an older system. What we're proposing is putting in, due to the depth of reduced. Anyway, what we're trying to do is eliminate the height of the mound, slope it down, and put in a drip treatment unit. And here's the 100-foot buffer along this edge. So there's a portion of the drip system in that along with the treatment unit. There's really no other place on site to replace it.
No.
Hey, you have a plan, right?
No, yeah, I have a plan and I'm fine with it.
Richard? Well, looks good. Lisa? Jen?
Yep.
Amy, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so the resource area is across the street,
Yeah,
so that's a good thing. As far as the confirmation, they have checked box B, which was confirmation of the resource area.
Yeah, it's not really.
Yeah, I don't think that we need
No.
to say, acknowledge that, or whatever, confirm that, but yes to C and D,
Okay.
it's an improvement. I
Well,
would-
good thing you had your coffee.
-3.
Okay. Anybody in the audience for 15 Kane Drive?
I make a motion for a -3.
All in favor?
Aye.
How's that, Mr. Spath?
All right, let's go to the second one.
Okay, you'll go to the next.
On June 4th, 2018, at the 6:15 meeting of the Town Hall, the Situate Conservation Commission will act on the request of
Lene.
Tui for a determination of applicability of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Situate Wetlands Bylaw to repair a septic system on property located at 183 Lawson Road, Scituate. Abutters and other interested parties are invited to attend.
Phil Spath, Engineering. Again, we have a repair of the septic system.
What do you think, we forgot you already?
You never know. I forgot myself. Here we go. We have a 50-foot buffer. We have the wetlands line across the street next to the train tracks. 50-foot buffer, 100-foot buffer. We place the system outside of the 100-foot buffer. There's an existing cesspool, and we want to pull the tanks up. This is a septic tank, pump chamber, pumping up, kind of straightforward.
The septic's between the 50 and the 100.
No, the septic is, these are the tanks.
I'm sorry, the tanks.
Septic is outside the 100-foot buffer.
Yeah.
Paul?
No questions.
The whole house is in there.
Jen?
Nope.
Amy?
Same comments. Actually, ironically, the same type of site with the resource areas across the street again.
Yeah.
So, same exact comments.
Okay, anybody in the audience? You didn't draw much of a crowd, Phil.
No, I make a motion for -3.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
And I wonder, right now, you can see, I'm again, the last one right here, is again for septic repair. I'm wondering, with gracious of these other people, if I could do that one right now?
Yeah, we're way over the time, sure.
Does anybody, they don't care.
Yeah, go ahead.
As long as it's the same quickness.
It's a fast drive.
This,
Anything for you, Phil. How's
Sure,
that?
I've heard that.
yeah.
Keep that in mind, okay? On June 4th, 2018, at the 6:50 meeting of the Town Hall, Situate Conservation Commission will hold a wetlands hearing under Chapter 131, Section 40, Massachusetts General Laws, and Section 30700, Town of Situate Code of Bylaws regarding the application of John J. Jr. and Eleanor Coyne to repair a septic system on property located at 14 Fieldstone Road, Scituate. Abutters and other interested parties are attending.
Thank you, that's me again. And here we have another site we're given. We have the wetlands out back going around. We have an existing septic tank and a failed Title V system within this area. The test pits and what we have been coming up with a Presby system, grading it down, and we'll be able to keep it by gravity on this. So we're going to be 21 feet from the BBW. There's no really room or an area to place this thing.
Phil, can I just, it couldn't have come over here into this area?
No, because there's a drain line right here.
Oh,
Yeah.
that was my only question.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
Richard?
No.
Paul?
No questions.
Lisa?
Nothing?
Presby is what, I'm sorry, Jen?
I'm hurt.
Boy, Frank,
Lisa was like leaning forward and I just...
I have so much to say now.
Poor Jen.
I know. No, I'm good. Thank you.
Presby is a pressure?
No.
Okay.
It doesn't, you can't pressure down, but it's a treatment. You get a reduction 4 to 2 to groundwater. It's an IA.
I got it. Okay.
And by kicking everything down,
Amy? Any thoughts on this one?
So it's a notice of intent, I mean, there's
It's
not a
just
lot
because
of
he's only
options.
20 feet from the wetlands.
Right.
So I
It's-
guess the only thing is, is this lawn all the way back to here,
Yeah,
Phil?
we have a, yes, it's all lawn right up to the wetlands, yes. We have silt sock on the bottom.
So how about it if they could create just a small buffer between the wetland and the lawn?
We do have it. right here.
Well, but this is all grass,
Right.
Yeah.
right up to the edge of the wetland. So what if they were to create even a 5-foot wide buffer between the wetland and that, either some simple vegetation, some bushes or something?
Well, there are bushes right up, like you say, if you look at that, there are bushes right up to the wetland.
Right, because they brought the lawn right to the wetland,
Right, yeah.
essentially. So just looking to get them away from the wetland a little bit with the lawn, that's all.
Could also add few conservation posts too. I mean,
Something simple to,
Yeah.
I know it's,
Help.
I mean,
Identify.
I understand. The septic system in itself is a benefit to the
Yeah.
wetland and the yard. We just typically like to try to get stuff,
So you get the, what I'm saying, you get the grass too, is acting, I mean, the area between here.
that's just my own thought. I really don't have a strong,
It's already.
there's a couple other comments that I had. One was, Board of Health did approve.
Yep.
Not sure about a DEP number, Phil.
Yeah.
Do you have it?
Yep, I do.
Okay, we have that in our, excellent, okay. Hello.
They didn't want to hear me.
Off the air.
DEP did issue a number and complete, no comments. Okay. Perfect.
No, you want this?
No, we'll print one out, don't worry.
all right.
I make a motion to close.
All in favor?
With those conditions?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll come up with something very simple.
Simple.
Okay.
Simple.
Frank wants a few blueberry bushes.
Hi, Bush.
We'll
All right, whatever, that's good, let's close it.
All right?
Give him a few bushes and move on.
That's seconded, you can vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Which, so Phil, what will happen next is we'll issue at the following meeting, so the first July meeting, we'll have them in hand, and you'll pretty much have them that next couple days, yes.
All right, thank you.
Town of Scituate, DPW, 2632 Gardner, they're requesting a continuance.
Correct.
Any idea where that's going?
Wait a minute,
Yes.
can I just, I think they're gonna, is this for 7 o'clock on June 18th then? McCarthy, 32 Gardner?
No.
Well, this is, oh, it's some,
26 and 32 this time, and next time it's just 32.
oh, all right. All right. So how long out does he want to go? I mean,
I guess we would just go to next June meeting.
okay.
We actually received, didn't we receive that NOI today? Yeah, so what's, you asked just for a quick update on that one. So DPW has come up with another plan for that project and submitted the NOI today. I haven't had a chance to take a thorough look at it, but it will essentially replace the one that you've been continuing if all the stars align.
Okay, so do
But
we
they
want
wanna
to,
keep this one open.
then?
Yes.
Okay.
They don't want to pull this one yet to make sure that this other one is going to be accepted.
okay, so a couple of weeks or a month?
No, just till the next June meeting, I would say.
Okay.
Okay, so I make a motion to continue 26, 32 Gardner Road to June 18th at 6:20.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. So Martin, 67 Border Street, raise and rebuild, continue.
Good evening. Jeff DeLisi, I'm here with Paul Marabito, as well as my clients, Peter and Monica Martin. At the last hearing, the applicant agreed to a continuance on the specific assurance that we would have a draft order of conditions to be able to review in the 2-week period between that meeting and this, and that this meeting would be voted, would be closed, voted, and an order signed. Despite that, I haven't seen any draft orders despite my multiple requests. So I'm a little discouraged. I'd like to see that this hearing be closed tonight, voted tonight, and that an order of conditions signed. And I'm wondering what we need to do to get there.
Well, I think what we agreed to, Jeff, and I do recall this discussion at the last meeting, and we certainly tried to move this along. I've had discussions with Amy and Carol about it as well. So I think we have things pretty well put together. We can close the meeting. I think we're pretty well set with conditions. We can discuss those. And maybe there's a couple of things that Carol's going to have to work out, and then we'll have them ready. So.
When will you have them ready?
Sometime later this week,
Yeah.
I would say.
That's okay.
We'll take that.
Yeah, I mean, the way I was kind of approaching this meeting was, if it was closed 2 weeks ago, we would have had 21 days. So if we're able to get it done this week, that would be 21 days from the last meeting.
Right.
And that would be acceptable. Anything beyond that?
No, I
you have a
understand.
problem?
I think we're pretty close with the pieces that we have. I mean,
Any issues with any special conditions that the commission is thinking about at this point?
Well, that was one of the things that, Frank, we left it open, was we were still waiting for final sign-off from your peer review engineer, which we did get, and you have. We also did receive a final set of revised plans from Ross last, I think, Thursday or something like that. So we have, seems like we have all the ducks in a row. I did spend quite a long time today evaluating all of the information and reading through the 8 sets of revised plans and peer reviews and stormwater reviews. So anyways, the conditions that I identified that you might want to consider, which were also identified by your peer review consultant, were encroachment beyond flags 27 and 28. And believe that the applicant was good with that, establishing a no-mow zone there where they had been mowing into the salt marsh area, or the buffer to the BVW at least. Let's see, testing, doing some testing of the tree box filter location prior to construction to make sure that the material is suitable for that infiltration to work. Recording the O&M plan and long-term pollution prevention plan by reference into the order of conditions, which is standard to memorialize the ongoing condition for maintenance of the structures. And establishing the limit of work at the top of Coastal Bank, where the landscaping would be on the side of that limit of work, so it would be obviously done towards the latter part of the project when things were stable. Oh, and then there's an infiltration trench, which John had noted that, you want to evaluate to make sure that it functions properly, so there would be a condition concerning that. And otherwise, I mean, we could go through the whole project again about where it does and doesn't meet and what waivers you've established for performance standards and waivers that you've provided. But in a nutshell, I mean, with all the resource area on the property, with Wetlands Protection Act, Rivers Protection Act, Scituate bylaw, it's coming in as a redevelopment, meeting redevelopment or not meeting redevelopment standards. Salt marsh, land subject to coastal storm flowage, A-zone, riverfront, coastal bank, raise rebuild project. I mean, I think we've covered everything. I think you've been quite thorough, and I would recommend an order of conditions at this point with the special conditions.
Frank, can she repeat the issue about the comment about the landscaping plan? You said the landscaping plan would be, they're doing some landscape, the landscaping plan shows some work on the river side of the house?
Yeah.
In that flat area?
Yeah.
I didn't hear your comment about
Oh,
the
just
condition on the.
the condition to have the limit of work be moved to follow the coastal bank, to be protective of the coastal bank. But in fact, there is disturbance in that 50-foot no disturb. So but there's planned landscaping as part of the restoration buffer enhancement. So but that would be on the seaward side of that limit of work.
Okay. All right, that's fine.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that, I know that on the stormwater permit, there was a specific waiver that was requested. Amy, I think, probably just alluded to it, but on the volume of the runoff going into the marsh, or, just want to make sure that gets voted as well.
I think we already agreed to
Yeah,
that.
waive the runoff rate and infiltration too, I believe.
Yeah, you had
Yeah,
voted
filtration.
for the peak discharge rate.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you voted the volume. I mean, one goes in hand with the other.
Do both?
Should vote for the volume if you haven't.
Okay.
So the stormwater permit would issue at the same time as the order? Is that how that works?
Yes.
I'm asking someone else.
Hmm?
I'm asking the commission.
He's asking someone who matters.
Ouch.
The issue, well, see, before you answer that, Frank, there should be a separate permit for the stormwater. It doesn't always work that way. In the past, the conditions have been rolled into the order, so it hasn't been a physically separate document.
Yeah.
However, there's been discussion with the planning office that we should really physically be issuing a separate permit. And that permit is not set to roll tomorrow, whereas the order is pretty well underway and ready to go.
Well, do we need to reinvent the wheel for this one, or?
Well, no, but I mean, it still takes time. You still want to make sure that you review it and write it and cite it properly, so.
What is the purpose of having it separate rather than with the order of conditions?
Well,
Question, Lisa, it's just, it's.
It's under a separate set of regulations.
Yeah, it's separate regulations,
Okay.
yeah.
so part
Yeah.
of the process is they want to move forward with a building permit. So if we issue these orders,
I don't think that would hold up the building permit.
well, as long as you can sign off on the building permit application,
Great.
that they can
Well,
move
actually,
forward.
at the last meeting, I offered to sign off on a demo permit, and I have not yet seen one, so.
Yeah, so
I
we're
mean-
just waiting for the full submission set at this point. So if you're okay doing that, then I'm sure it'll be in before then anyway, but that'd be great.
Okay.
Usually the stormwater permit is in the stormwater calcs. It's just a two-page form. There's not a lot on it, so.
Well, that's the application, but there's a permit, which is actually like 4 or 6 pages long.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, the permit is what you sign at the bottom.
Right.
I've never seen a commission actually sign that form, for whatever reason, but, I mean.
Do you want yours signed, Paul?
Pardon?
Do you want
Well,
yours
you have
signed?
to
No?
sign it, but
Doesn't have to be
Well,
signed.
I mean.
I mean, the stormwater review is all part of
With the
the,
order, I would like to, because what I think I would actually do is incorporate by reference the permit into the order too.
Okay,
That way it's one document.
all right.
That would be awesome, but the
You can
main thing is not to hold them up
record
any
it all at
longer either.
once,
Yeah.
You know what I
The
mean?
building permit.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else in the audience to speak to this?
I make a motion to close.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Right.
Aye.
Okay.
We're ready to go.
All right.
And so we'll have those pieces for you.
So
Great.
you want to make a motion to issue too.
Yes.
I make a motion to issue the orders of condition for project 67. And we're gonna, what, sign
With
it?
special conditions
With
as
the-
noted.
Oh, yeah, with the special conditions we just discussed.
As well as to issue the stormwater.
I
Waivers.
don't know,
We do that separately?
yeah.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I don't think that you need a motion for the stormwater
I don't think
permit.
so either.
Yeah.
You just approve it, yeah.
Yeah.
You're good? I guess I'm
But
agreeing.
good job.
Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Go on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Smile. Keep
Good
smiling,
luck.
Jeff.
Penny,
Okay.
anything for you.
Yeah, there you go.
Whoa.
Nielsen, 127 Ann Vinyl Road, septic repair. Continued.
Hallelujah. Good luck. Thank you. You got a gorgeous property down there.
Don't forget the party.
We're coming. I know.
Good evening.
Good evening, Jeff Assett with Morse Engineering. This is a septic repair at 127 Ann Vinyl Road.
I know there's a couple people interested in seeing it. Maybe, Jeff, you can kind of twist this around. Penny's got a plan, so she's all set.
The property's 15,000 square feet in size, but the lot is only 40 feet wide.
Yes.
It's developed with a two-bedroom, one-story, small, single-family dwelling with a deck on the front and a deck on the back. We had the wetlands delineated by Brad Holmes, professional wetland scientist with environmental consulting and restoration. There's a BVW almost directly behind the house in the rear, and there's also a BVW on the opposite side of the roadway here. The 50-foot buffers are shown in red. We are proposing to upgrade the septic. Currently, there's a cesspool in the wetland. Plumbing comes out the back, so that will be abandoned, pumped, and filled. We're going to redo the plumbing to bring it out the front of the house to get it as far away from the wetlands as we can. It'll be a pretty conventional system. It'll be a 1,500-gallon septic tank, a 1,000-gallon pump chamber, and then pumping up to a leaching field. The leaching field is actually the smallest leaching field that Title V allows us to build. That's because we have nice gravelly soil, and it's only a two-bedroom house. We have a retaining wall going around the entire system. That's because we want to allow water to flow freely around it. There's 17 feet from the wall to the edge of the road, so the runoff could go that way. We're also not grading right up to the house. There's 7 feet between the wall and the house, so water could go that way. The wall is 3 feet tall. The septic's in an area that's currently compacted gravel used for parking. So that will be removed and converted to lawn, so that's an improvement as well. And the system is at a minimum 60 feet from the wetland, and it's a great improvement because we're, again, getting rid of that cesspool and putting in a Title V septic system.
You said this is a one-bedroom, Jeff?
It's a two-bedroom house. It's a one-story
Okay.
One-story house. Actually, these are some photos I took today. Looking from the street at the face of the house, the deck has been removed, and then looking back, that gravel area kind of next to the dumpster is where the leaching field will be. And those are all 6 copies of the same.
Can see pretty quickly.
Very difficult lot.
Yes.
Not have a lot of wiggle room at all. I don't know what else to do, except leave it in the,
No, that's not.
that's just not acceptable. Leave it where it is. So, I don't know.
Just the same picture. They're all the same.
Yeah.
Richard?
I don't see the choices. I think it's an improvement.
Paul?
No questions.
Lisa?
Definitely going in the
Jen?
right direction, it's better.
Jan, you're
Oh,
down there.
yes. I know, I'm here. No, I'm good.
Amy?
Agreed. So this will be a huge improvement over having the cesspool in the resource area. One thing I did want to note is that this is part of other improvements that are happening at the property right now. So there's some, I don't know, some reno work going on. I think that the foundation had rotted, and there's maybe a deck that some footings have been replaced, maybe some reused, maybe 1 or 2 replaced. So my suggestion is for that work, which was, there was some work done without a permit through this office, that we would incorporate that work into this order, if we could.
How can we do that?
I can speak to that. They're not expanding the footprint of the structure at all.
Right.
They're rebuilding the deck. So they took the front deck off, they poured 5 new sonotubes, and then they're rebuilding it in the same location. What's that?
What was the deck on prior?
It was on, it had some similar supports. I brought some photographs of that. It's kind of a similar surface to where the septic's going, kind of compacted gravel. And those are the sonotubes that are already in.
That they put in new?
Yeah,
Okay.
those were already put in.
That's fine.
But there was something there before holding up the deck in the
Was
same spot.
foundation new?
No, the foundation is old.
Oh, I heard that he re-poured part of the foundation. I don't know, a contractor was in today and showed me some really rotted sills and stuff, and it looks,
Okay. If he did it, it still doesn't expand the footprint.
it
Maybe he
was
did
all
some
on the same
patching.
footprint.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're not looking to expand. Yeah.
But to your point, I mean, there's work that got started without any filing. So they got, I think there was a cease and desist from the building department
There
because
was.
there wasn't a permit.
Right, there was no work, the property was shut down for the past couple of months.
So there's work on both ends of this house, and obviously the back end of the house is right up against a BVW. Do we know anything about that? Any excavation, material?
No, I mean, it
erosion
looked
control?
pretty, from what was described to me, it was pretty straightforward, those cardboard sonotube things that you, and then just exposing the rot, and they re-poured where the foundation had been, but not even formed it out. I don't know, I'm unclear, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, but we're not showing any erosion control or any kind of,
No, but the site is stable, it's pretty level, and the work is done. So they're just looking to get up and running and rebuild the deck. So it was, I would categorize it, if it had come without the septic system, we would have done it as an RDA.
I understand. But
Yeah.
even with an RDA, we would have at least wanted some idea of what was happening right alongside the.
And you would have wanted an erosion control.
Right.
But it's already done.
The work is done both in the front and backyard already?
The
No,
pouring
it
of the
was-
sonnet.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
done, but the work's not complete because they were shut down. But I think that
But they won't be disturbing the soil any further. It's just framing
Right.
up.
Any further? What do you mean? 15, 20 sonotubes?
Wait, you know what?
I'm sorry, I do apologize.
You're gonna get your turn.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
I suppose if there was any further earth disturbance, then a hay bale should certainly should go in. If,
we don't
if, or the mulch
Salt
stock.
sock, whatever.
You could also condition to put it in just to kind of define that limit of work and keep contractors from going beyond that wetland line.
Right.
The tree line is actually all the way back here.
Yeah.
Right.
So we could put a hay bale right along that flagging line, define it.
Okay.
Nothing else, it'll keep maybe the framers from stockpiling like the 2x6s and beyond
I
there.
think that's a reasonable piece to work towards.
I think so.
Okay. Anything else you want to add to this, Sammy, at the moment?
No.
Okay. So obvious,
Well,
the
did I
audience.
say Board
Sure.
of Health, just one,
Yeah.
Board of Health met last week on this, and there were some concerns about the BBW line, and so they wanted it just to come to us first, have us vote on it, and they'll issue, but otherwise, I understand it that they're good with whatever waivers were presented, and we're gonna vote the upgrade in.
Okay.
What was the issue with the line?
Can I see that?
I'm not sure.
The neighbors had some concerns about it, and most of the major one is that the abutter to the east,
Yeah.
he believes there's a wetland located right here, immediately adjacent to the septic. I have photographs of the area. It's maintained lawn. It's not a wetland. This, see our property line kind of depends on the tree line. You can see the dumpster beyond.
Even if it was, where are we gonna put it?
If it was a wetland, it is off-site. It's over the property line, but I mean, it's the neighbor's lawn. It's.
I mean, let's face it, that's a really difficult site to get a septic system on. Yeah. I don't know.
All right. So for the audience, sure, and just we want to get your name and address.
I'm sorry, Frank.
Name and address.
I'm Steve Combs. I've been at 129 for 36 years.
Sure.
So, been there for a while. What this young gentleman, the engineer, just showed, the water coming over. Is this my house? Okay. My house, is this the property line here?
Yes.
My house is kilted. It sits 4 feet here and 3 feet off. I have these two, they're 6 light windows with the wood mullions and sill and all that. It sits that high off the ground, okay? The last 4 storms this past, from January till about a month ago, the water's gotten this deep in that driveway. My house is, the front's 4 feet, it's 3 feet here, it's kilted. These were all built back in the 1920s on cedar posts.
Right.
Sometime in the 50s or 60s, they went in and Mickey Mouse cinder blocks under them, mine included. Paul's aunt used to be the same thing. My sills on top of the cinder blocks have bricks jammed in there, and then it's fed to the cement. This is way before they started pouring foundations. They call them cedar posts. When I bought my house, a guy says, "Oh, the cedar posts look good. Let me see something." And he was a builder in Scituate, he poked his finger in, and the water was like an aquifer. I had to have him put 2 lally cones on to hold the house up. All they did, they call it a rat floor, they poured this thick. Mary Montero's old house is even worse, the one here. That septic is out here, okay? It's actually a gully like this, and it's, when I say when it rains, it gets this deep, and it sits there for 3 or 4 weeks. It sits out here where they want to put the septic from this apron right here, all the way back towards the house. 4 or 5 years ago, before he's a retired state worker, Jimmy, he had 4 or 5 6-wheeler dump trucks of the stone dumped in here. Then, these new people that bought it, it sat there for 3 or 4 years, they put all stone here, they put the 5 sonotubes in, dug down, put them in new. Oh, and my buddy, I was working on my lobster, and I go, "What?" And he goes, "Look over there." This is before everything grew in the green. They ripped, this is the back, right? They ripped down about a 12 by 18 or 20 foot long back of the house, all right? I put a new roof on 7 years ago. I came here and got the permit before I put the roof on, okay? This whole thing is wet, and it's brutal back here. You stand there, even right now, go down there today, and you'll stand there, you'll get up to your ankles in about 4 or 5 minutes just standing there. That's how wet it is. I've been here 36 years. My house is here. If this is the ground next to my house and Mary's old fence, the sill is right here. This water that he showed going here and here is gonna dump right into my cellar. They're these old, you know the windows, we used to sell at the Welch Company. They stuffed them in the cinder blocks sometime in the 50s or 60s. And I got sunlight coming into my cellar through there. I can't keep anything down there. I'm on my 7th sump pump in 36 years. It's bad.
Okay.
This is crazy.
Steve, how much
I
stone,
can't believe it.
how much stone are they putting outside of your house?
Right in front?
On their property, how much stone? Just recently?
Jimmy put in 5 or 6 of the 6-wheeler trucks, and then those guys dumped, recently, the new guys dumped from the front of the house here, all along here, where these 5 sonotubes are, they dumped all stone around here and all back here. Then they went and rebuilt the deck with no permit.
Yeah,
It's like, it's crazy. And then I heard the other day, one of these meetings, I think it was whatever day we were here before, they couldn't disturb some property, they couldn't go below grade. Those sonotubes, they put down 3 or 4 feet in the ground.
Sure.
Without coming before the board or anything. I mean, there's mold on the roof. We've watched raccoons going in and out of the vents up here, they're living in there. If I had known that some lady, some what do they call, flipping house lady was gonna buy for 75 grand, I would've taken it out of my 401K and bought the thing, and ripped the whole thing down and left it the way it is, the land, just so you know. It's wet back there.
The problem is, Steve, that what we've got to come up with is you can't take a home from somebody. I realize
That's
that.
fine.
That there's a problem. So what we've got to figure out is a way to have a compliant septic system. They can't just go dig.
Without flooding my property, or my house.
That's what we have to talk about.
What's a tight tank? Tell me what that is.
Well, let's let the engineer respond to your
Okay.
comments and.
I mean, I'd like to.
Sure.
I mean, what we're talking about, this is.
What's your
I'm sorry,
name,
my name's
please?
Paul Mendez. I live on the opposite side of this house. I got a bunch of pictures here, but.
So we're not really, I mean, we know that there was a violation with them doing construction ahead of time. That's really not what our purview is tonight. I mean, we know that they were stopped and that they have to go through this process in order to get going again. What we want to figure out, the filing before us is a notice of intent to do a septic system. And then at the same time, we'd like to include whatever work that they need to do so that it's all inclusive in the filing.
Right.
Is what we're looking at. And the reason, obviously, when you're here is that you want to give us your concerns so that your house isn't impacted by the work that they, I understand. So that's the process that we want to go through tonight.
Correct.
So what I'm saying is, we don't need to reiterate work that they've done there, we know that.
No, not with the work. I just want to show you the picture of some of the water that's.
Sure.
This is not even, I mean, look at that. But it's twice as worse as that. Now, that's that, okay? Now, I went in front of I bought the house 10 years ago.
Right.
I went in front of the board, I went in front of, well, everybody here.
Yeah.
And I went through the whole smear, okay? And what happened, I was near the wetlands.
Sure.
So I had to go in front of the committee, so here it is. Mine, okay? This is because I couldn't put my garage on. Now, this is their house. Now, this is all wetland. Okay? So, and they're gonna put this, probably a foot, 2 feet away from my property. So, all right here, as you can see in that picture, this is filled up with water.
Right.
Now, I have grandkids. This is water that sits here. My grandkids are gonna get stuck. And they want to put a 3-foot, 4-foot wall beside my house and just have a puddle, a pond. I mean, the ducks sit here. The ducks sit all along here. And you can probably go there right now, and it's been dry for a period of time.
Not today.
No, I know, not today. But, I mean, you see, I mean, the ducks just sit in here.
Can we see that photo?
I'm
please?
sorry.
Thank you.
I mean, I look at, and I'm not trying to pin.
No,
I'm not trying to pinpoint
It's a legitimate
concern.
concern.
And I'm not trying to put the blame on nobody, but I mean,
Yeah.
when you put down stone or put anything next to wetlands, aren't you supposed to go in front of the, okay,
Yeah.
now, what does that look like? What does that look like? What does that look like?
Yeah.
Is that right there? Was there, and I emailed, and to be honest with you, I've been to the wetland committee, with the wetland, to Amy, quite a few times, and there was nothing. To be honest with you, I went to the, what's it called, the Mass DEP.
Yeah.
I had a meeting with that gentleman, and he told me to email, instead of verbalizing things, email. I emailed her, was there any permits for the stones? Was there any permits for the concrete being poured?
So we know that there's not, and that's why they got a cease and desist.
No, that's not why they got a cease and desist. I'll show you. Another reason why they got a cease and desist is because they put an addition on the back. They put an addition on the back. He gave them a permit to take apart a deck. Now, I get a bunch of pictures on my phone, which a realtor was over there and took a bunch of pictures of all the posts that he poured. He must have poured by 15 to 20 posts all cement, all next to, less than, this way, if you look at some of these posts, it's less than 3 feet away from wetlands.
That's completely different.
I mean, Frank, you pretty much know what, this is what the impression right there?
This is the front.
We got a line here, so, but I can't see on this one. Neil Murphy did this plan for you.
Right.
Do you remember who flagged the wetlands?
Yes, I do.
Who was that?
His name was, the same firm.
Brad Holmes?
Brad Holmes. Okay, and to be honest with you, I was gonna have it redone.
That's all right.
You know what I mean? I know it doesn't go away, but
Sure.
it is what it is. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, everybody here knows, I mean, Steve Bjorkman, if there's any place to make any money, Steve Bjorkman will be on. I spoke to Steve Bjorkman on this property a long time ago, and I said, Steve, what about this property? What is this first thing? No one can do nothing with it. Okay, now helping somebody from California, come take a picture of it, get some kind of crazy loan from I don't know
Yeah,
what
but
bank.
that
you
doesn't
know.
have anything
All
to do
right,
with
right.
this.
So, all right, so we got the point.
And I just can't see.
Just show that,
I have a copy of that.
okay.
And it's, the other thing is too is, I think it's insane. I mean, I don't want, my grandkids are my world.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandkids play over there, and I don't really see how like,
Okay.
it could be done.
Well, that's what we're here to discuss.
Right.
Okay.
And I'm just, my point is, I think there was something else I wanted to say, I should have wrote it
Sure.
down.
Here's your photos, don't forget your photos.
Well, actually, we want to keep a couple of those, I
Oh,
think.
I want you to keep those, matter of fact, I got some doubles.
Okay, good.
And, in fact, I was gonna give you all, because
All right. So,
Thank you.
Oh, that's the back, that's the stone I was talking about.
yeah, I gave her this one already.
Jeff, when these wetlands were delineated, did anybody do any soils along the edge of that property?
On our property, yes. So when Brad delineated the wetland, he was aware that in the past there wasn't a wetland delineated off-site. It was done by himself in this area.
Right.
He looked in that area, he says it is not a wetland. It's a maintained lawn. What's interesting is when that garage was permitted, they called it a wetland, but when they did the foundation as-built plan, it was no longer a wetland, it was removed from the plan. Wetlands change. Today, it's not a wetland. Brad and I went out a second time today and looked at that when we were looking at some other properties. It's not a wetland. The photographs I sent you today, that I showed you today, were taken this afternoon during the spring, during a rainstorm. It certainly puddles. I know there's some other photographs that showed puddling deeper. We're in a floodplain. It's a land subject to coastal storm flowage. It's in a low-lying area. It's only elevation 7. You're gonna have puddles. This is really the furthest location we can put the septic away from the BBW. We're 60 feet away. We do have walls. The reason we're doing walls is so that we don't interfere with the flow of water, so that water coming down from the abutter's hill can flow onto the property and beyond if need be.
What's the grade, what's the top of the system?
It's 11.1,
And what's the grade?
7.5. So the wall is exactly 3 feet tall, and then it grades up another foot.
So you're gonna pour a foundation around that whole thing, almost 4 feet out, 3.5 feet out of the ground?
It's gonna be 3 feet tall exactly, Versalock. We could grade it out on the front, and we could grade it right up to the house, but that would impede the water flow, so that's why we're not doing that. The reason we have the septic on this side is that the other neighbor mentioned that his house is 4 feet off the property line. I don't want to put a 3-foot mound, actually, I can't put a 3-foot mound that close to his house.
Right.
So we've put a lot of thought into where to position this, and, the property owners, they don't want a mound either, but there's really no way around it.
I spent a lot of money on my home, I spent a lot of money engineering. I just understand that how can somebody come from California and just try to do something like this, and then my house, I talked to 3 realtors, they told me that my house is gonna be depreciated for number 1, Number two, that's not my point, because I don't plan to move, but at least, I don't want a puddle in my side yard.
Okay.
This house only sold for
Right.
$75,000. I think renovating it and giving it a facelift and a new septic is going to increase the value.
Gosh, they never did nothing, they still never even had a permit to do anything on that house, and then they just, it's like stealing, they just went there and they just,
I understand, and we realize that there's a violation, I realize it's upsetting, and I understand, but at the same, we're a commission here that has to look at a piece and say, okay, what can be applied for, and then we have to look at it and say, can we allow it or can't we? Or does something else have to be done here? So let's just kind of work through this process. Steve?
Right, he just said 7-foot grade there, right? That's the front, it's a gully out back. Literally, there are ducks back there. all
Sure.
right? And if he puts a 4-foot wall within 5, because I told you, here's that property, here's my house. If he puts a 4-foot wall next to it, that water's coming right into my cellar windows, they're that high off the ground.
Well, what he just said was that they can't put the elevated piece on that side, that's why they chose
So what's gonna be on my side?
a driveway, it looks like.
no, not just a driveway, but
Driveway?
where's the water gonna go?
It's gonna come right into my cellar.
I
They're this big of windows, there's 6 pane with the wood mullions, and the sill, like, what do you call it, the sills are that high off the ground.
Right.
That water's gonna flush right into my cellar.
I get it.
And I don't think the elevation is correct from the street, because I know that it's not no 4 inches from the top of the street to his driveway, even with all the fill they already put on there. I guarantee that by at least a foot and a half.
Okay.
I should have mentioned too, the area where the leaching field is going right now it's almost impervious. It's compacted gravel, and it's going to be loam and seed.
But essentially, it's creating a big mound around an area right now that's going to be substantially more material there than was there before. So it's going to totally displace any water that was in that area.
It is, but it's land subject to coastal storm flowage, and it's going to allow the water to go around it. It won't impede the water and create a puddle.
I understand that, but.
Where would it go though?
It's going to go where it goes now.
Right.
This is not pleasant.
No, it's not. I mean, granted, I mean, like I said, I went to the Mass DEP, and he wasn't too keen on it either. Not that he wasn't too keen on it, it's like, I said, hey, look, would you want that big puddle in front of your grandchildren playing in there? So, like, I mean.
So the alternatives are, for us, I mean, is a septic system that is under review by Board of Health, or they've approved it?
No,
or-
they didn't approve it. She said that they approved it, they didn't approve it at all. They said, looks like you got a you got a wetland problem. Take care of the wetland problem first, and then if they allow it, come and see us. And
Well, wait, the Board of Health will either sign the thing or they won't, so.
Right, so I met with Jen Keefe, our Board of Health agent, on this one, and her comments are that there were concerns by the abutters about the wetland resource delineation, and so Board of Health felt that they would continue it to see how things turned out with this board, but other than that, she was good to approve it. So
that hearing is June 11th.
meaning that it meets Title V requirements with waivers that they require.
I didn't hear that. You can listen to the video. I listened to the video today. That didn't say nothing like that. That she disapproved.
All right.
I mean, Jeff, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Did you consider a tight tank out here that would not change grades?
Tight tanks are a last resort. DEP only allows us to do a tight tank if there's no other alternative option. What happens is, they cost a lot of money to pump, and down the road, people end up doing their own weekend makeshift leaching fields, and you end up with what you basically have now. So that's a last resort if you absolutely cannot put a conventional system in.
So is there any other way, Jeff, have you looked at any other grading or anything else? Is there any way to get this water that's gonna be around that to move either to the back of the property or something else? Is there another way to improve this site in terms of the impact on the neighbors?
Well, what if we did I'm already calling out a gravel driveway, but what if you condition it that that had to be a pervious gravel driveway, and maybe it's 6 inches of stone, so you're essentially putting in a huge stone trench in the front yard.
Do we have another plan? I'm just looking, trying to figure out the grade.
What did I do?
Do you have any grades at the back of the property, Joe?
Trying to see what contour that is.
I just can't see it a lot.
Right, there's a couple up front, but
I believe that's a 7 contour running through the wetland from A2 to flag A3.
You think that's 7 feet?
An elevation, yeah, it is. It's an elevation 7 contour.
So
Just
is-
a benchmark right behind it.
And then there's a mark right to the right of the deck that's saying it's 7.7. But then it starts to drop again, going towards and vinyl, then it's 7.4, 7.2. So is it sort of a high point right off that deck?
Yeah, there is. It only comes up.
That sound right?
Yeah, it's only coming up a few inches, about 6
It's-
inches.
The front puddle's about this much. And by the way, today, that massive rainstorm we had, we got about 0.45 inches.
Yeah.
I have a very, very accurate digital system, because I have
So-
4 different gardens.
So I'm just wondering, I mean, I'm looking at a grade that's way in the back that's like 6.7, which is quite a ways away, and it's only a foot lower. It looks like there's a fence that runs all along there.
Yeah, 300 feet back, between my property and there, and then the other side is 300 feet between the left side of 127 and Paul's.
Okay. So this, it's actually fenced in on either side.
All right, with stockade. The previous owner had that done years ago, probably 14 or 15 years ago. It's all collapsing in on the mud now.
Well, it looks like it's not on the property line anyways.
I'd be glad to run a 2-foot wide by 2-foot deep stone trench along that property line, beginning of the septic tanks and going
Well,
back
that's
to
what I'm
wetland
wondering, if
flag
there's a
A1.
possibility.
move some water back.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds to me like it's all in the groundwater table anyways. I mean, seasonally, you're basically saying groundwater table is quite near the surface. Like it's completely saturated.
But if
so
it- but-
It's not gonna have any,
But if he could get water flowing to the back of this property from here to alleviate that problem, it would be better than just leaving it alone.
it would be, you would need to design it though, yeah.
Well, you're right, when the whole place is a lake, that's not gonna help. But there's probably a lot of rain events where if you could move some of the water back, it would help.
During,
Yeah, I think it's a
Dry
pretty
season.
simple, low-cost thing that could help the abutters. It could be done when the septic's going in.
So you get this in terms of regulations between different boards. I mean, we're dealing with the wetlands piece of this and whether it can be allowed. And at the same time, we're gonna wind up with some of the drainage as well as the Board of Health will. And we've gotten this argument before about tight tanks. The only place I've seen them install tight tanks is typically down at the beach where there's absolutely no place to put a septic system. Other than that, DEP, and there's a bunch of different arms of DEP. So we're dealing with the environmental piece of it. There's DEP that deals with sewerage and all that sort of stuff. So they can sometimes conflict to some degree. But they're saying, you got a house that's pre-existing, no one's gonna take that house away from somebody. There's gonna be some sort of structure there. And then how do they deal with the sewage from that structure? And they want an approved system. So the only way to get an approved system is the system has to be elevated and out of the groundwater. Okay?
I mean, yes, okay.
So, I mean, so that's a set of rules that we don't set, that are set by that. So we take a look at what we have for this, we try to keep them away from the wetlands to some degree. It's all been altered, you know, a lot of your property's all been filled. Your property that had a wetlands line looks like it has fill on it now.
No, it's been, my thing, I've been that for years. I had, after I had it built, they told me.
The middle property, that's always been wet.
Right.
Between mine and Paul's. It's
So-
always been.
So, but we know that
Low.
overall, it's
Always been that.
it's lower in the back. So one of the alternatives may be that if he sets up some sort of drain that can get that water between your property and that one and get it moving to the back of the property.
But there's no way, there's, number one, he says there's gravel fill there.
Yeah.
There's no gravel fill, that's all clay.
Where is it gonna go between, the windows are literally, that's the property line, the edge of this table. The windows, here's my cellar, there's one here, about 12 feet that way, there's another window. When that water comes between the 4-foot wall, my foundation, the wall's that high. Where is that water gonna go there? Even if you pipe back the, the leaching, whatever, from the septic, what's gonna happen right here? What are you gonna have,
I don't know where there is. I'm looking at this plan.
right here, excuse me, right here. It's gonna look like Venice. This is Ann Vinyl. My house is literally, is this the one?
Yeah.
Yeah. My house is literally right here.
So what he's saying is,
That water's gonna come right in here, and this is gonna be filled with water, even if you
Steve.
put the piping.
just let Jeff show you where he would put a swale.
So here's your house right here, we located it, and then the stock and the fence running along the property line is right
Yeah.
here. It's actually on our property by, I don't know, 2 or 3 feet.
No, it's not, it's on my property, I had it surveyed.
Okay.
Okay.
Regardless, the swale that we're gonna install would go along the entire property line or the stone trench, and it would work to push the water back to the wetland instead of going towards your house.
I don't believe it. You're gonna be held culpable, right?
It couldn't happen.
Who's gonna be held culpable when my cellar, when the windows are flooded?
There's no way, 'cause when that
Will it be
fills
the
up.
conservation?
We can't have,
I don't know, he's talking.
So the water is going towards his house now, and this is an opportunity where we can put this stone trench in and divert the water to the back.
And try and
It will help.
alleviate it, so.
Is your firm gonna be held responsible when my cellar floods? Through the two windows? Have you seen the windows?
but you're just, but your basement's flooding now.
No, it floods up from the bottom. There's a sump pump hole there, it's been there since I moved in.
Right.
It comes up from the bottom. The increase of water that comes, that driveway's bad enough as it is. You put a 4-foot wall, it's gonna be like, it's gonna be, here's my foundation with the windows this high off the ground, and here's a 4-foot wall. And there's
So-
gonna be this little path where it's just solid water from Ann Vinyl all the way back.
So let's just say, for instance, we say to them, we don't think that you should disturb this, and they need to put a tight tank there. Okay? That's what we say. And then DEP that deals with the sewage says, no, we're not gonna accept that. Okay?
What do you mean the sewer? There's no sewage running down the street.
They're gonna, they have to put a new septic system, in some sort of septic in here, right?
Right,
Okay? So if we don't accept this,
yeah.
okay, if we don't accept this, then they go back and they say, well, you're gonna have to have a tight tank,
Okay.
okay? So then that gets submitted to the state, and then the state spins around and says, no, we're not gonna accept a tight tank. There's an alternative to a tight tank on this site, it's a septic system. Okay? So let's just say that happens. So we can be overruled.
Yeah.
Okay, so this could go on for a while, but we could be overruled. And then the state just says, build that septic system for that house. So our alternative right now is to take a look at this and decide if there's some alternative that can be done that might help you with this situation. There isn't a lot that can be done, it's a narrow lot, you know you already have a problem with water. Is there an alternative that would at least take care of some of this water problem?
I don't think there is, Frank. I will tell you, that whole cellar filled up with water. Their whole cellar, right now, if there was no sub pump down there, no nothing, that water, there's probably this much water below.
Oh, it sits there.
Basically below the foundation.
So,
It just sits there.
so what is gonna happen?
I'll be honest with you, I'll be honest with you, if I was, this whole situation was just really unbelievable. When you buy a house, like we were here last week, when you buy a house, the first thing you do is go to the town hall. What do I need? It's near the wetlands, the first thing you have to do is not go to Amy.
But, so they
Right.
skipped the step, they started the work, they got stopped.
Right.
So now here we are, trying to figure out this.
Right, but that's what I'm saying, and then she would have noticed that, you know something? You can't do nothing with those pieces of property.
But that's not your call.
Well,
But that's not the point.
Right, well, the only thing is, I mean, I'm not gonna let it go, and I don't think he's gonna let it go. We don't want our investment that we did for our lives. He worked very hard for his home, I worked hard for my home, okay, and it's gonna be.
The owner lives in Temecula, California. I was stationed out there for 4 years at Camp Pendleton. And she's found it on the internet, I was told by the.
I understand, but
We lived here all our lives.
the problem still
I
is.
mean, I can see if one of you guys would purchase a home and say, listen, we want to live there, this person's just doing this for investment.
But we cannot stop
Right.
them from putting a septic in. I hear you, I sympathize with you, but Frank's right. If this goes to DEP, they're just gonna say, throw the system in. You're not gonna get it trenched, you're gonna get nothing.
Then
We're
who do
trying.
we go after?
I really don't know. I'm just saying, we
They're
are trying, Frank has tried to come up
Going
with.
after the engineering firm.
No, well,
Or the
they're not.
contractor or the owner.
And I
Oh,
sympathize
no.
with you too. I mean, we put a lot of thought into this and we came up with this is really the best solution.
I've been there 36 years, I put a lot of thought into it too.
It's
I'm gonna have a canal next to my
about these
cell, and it's coming right in my windows.
I understand.
Well.
We're
what are
trying
we
to
doing?
come up with the best possible thing. We cannot stop
No.
somebody from putting
Okay.
it in.
I'm
As
throwing
far
out
as-
some thoughts. I mean, if you guys
I
got another one,
understand.
that's fine, but ultimately,
It's gonna happen.
something's gonna happen here.
Right, something's gonna happen. I mean, now, also too, I mean, I always thought that, like, if you did something, like, for instance, if you did something against the law, like they poured stone and they poured, stone and cement in the wetlands, what is the repercussion of that?
We tell them to remove it.
So you're gonna tell them to remove all the sonotubes and remove all the stone?
The cement and all the stone.
Is it in?
Is it in the wetland? I mean, he's showing me a
It
wetland.
was
Yes, up that
pre-existing.
picture up back.
It was pre-existing.
It goes all on the side of the house and all up back,
Was it pre-existing?
Yeah, it's pre-existing,
And the new sonotube.
repairing the existing deck.
in the wetland.
Decks.
Say that again?
The decks are pre-existing, and as well as the existing foundation, and they're repairing the existing, pre-existing decks and fountain.
Right.
It is a mess. I mean, put me, like, when he applied for a bill inspector, for a demolition of a deck. Now, by law, I would imagine, Frank, you would know, if he tore down all the wood, that'd be fine, tore down the deck. But he didn't just do that, he interrupted the dirt, he touched the dirt. Once you touch the dirt, you have to go in front of the wetlands, when you're 50 feet of the wetlands.
So we're there.
Okay, so he's in there, so he dug his foundation without going to the wetland.
I understand.
So, like you said, so you'd make him rip them out, so I'd like to see them be ripped out.
I think if I came in front of you and said we're repairing the deck and we need to replace the sonotubes, we're gonna dig a hole 3 feet deep and pour a sonotube in place, it's something that you would approve, maybe even under an RDA.
Mm-hmm.
We would have, he's just put the argument. Oh.
It's a mess, and I do, you know something, I feel bad for you guys, and I feel, but put you guys in our shoes, you know? I mean, it's just.
But there was a house there before. There's an existing home there.
Right, I agree.
It wasn't getting torn down. Someone has a house, and let's just say that it never changed hands, that the people that owned it
Right.
5 years ago came to us and said, listen, we want to put a septic system in, and we're gonna fix up this house. We want to live there.
Right, I mean, it's.
And we'd be looking at the exact same thing. I understand your issue.
A lot of violations.
I understand your, a lot of these houses work. Today, most of the houses, yours, whatever, probably wouldn't be conditioned to be built. But they were built long before the Wetlands Protection Act, okay? So we have to deal with.
I went in front of the board.
I understand that. And so now we have a project that's in front of us. And so we're trying to figure out the best scenario that we can deny it. I mean, we can just say, but we have to have a basis to deny
You
it.
have to have a reason, a look. legitimate.
The basis for denial.
I don't see why.
Property is not,
But there's already a house there, Steve. There's already a house.
I understand that.
So what do you want them to do?
Have the town put septic down in Vineland, nobody will have any
Well,
problem.
we'd be happy.
That's all. The whole town lot. I waited 36 years for that.
Well, I've been waiting longer.
I was on Seaview Ave back in the 70s when they did the first road.
So, all right.
My house.
I've been in.
Yeah, we have to, we get,
Longer.
So-
we still have another hearing tonight.
Amy wants to speak.
Yeah, so I think we've heard a lot of comment on this.
Yep.
Bringing it back around, it's an improvement to repair the septic in the resource area. You're right, I mean, you are required by law to allow them to repair, even though,
They're required by law to put a septic in.
that's right, they are.
This is mandatory, that's the problem.
So-
You can't just say no septic.
I mean, the concerns about, you know, storm damage prevention and flow onto the abutters, I mean, I suppose you could request continuance for further evaluation of how they're gonna mitigate possible, you know, negative implications from the system, but in the end, you're still gonna end up with the system, so I think you could condition that. I don't know, as far as wrapping the work that was done without a permit, if they had come in with a notice of intent for both the septic and for housework, we would have different fees, so we could
Charge
ask,
the fees.
we could ask for some fees,
Would you allow?
or after the fact, it would
Yeah, we
be,
would.
after the fact, you typically double the fees, so that's a little bit of a shot. So, you know, it's definitely a penalty of doing it without, you know, the wrong order. Your other options, so approve with conditions, deny, but again, I think we could, I'm sure what we would deny on, other than, well, yeah, I will have to think about that, or we could request additional information and continue.
I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think that we probably should get the additional information. I think I'd like to see some sort of drain or whatever shown. You are creating a situation where you're displacing water. You know, you may have water that can flow into the ground there, but essentially you're elevating that area. So I think that you should show us some sort of drain, Jeff, that gets back there, that you think will work. And at the same time, I think that the work that's on the house, sonotubes, whatever, should all be shown on this plan, and they should be part of the NOI.
So give us a new, or sort of incorporate the new work and with new fees
Right.
as after the fact.
Yeah.
Double.
Yep, after fact, double fees.
And what about, like, on my side, where the water's gonna be, where that wall's gonna be, where the water's just gonna sit there? Where, is that water supposed to go down that drain too?
Go ahead.
That's why we're not filling right up to the property line and grading it out, and we're not filling right up to the foundation. The wall will just go, it's gonna go like that. It's gonna go where it goes now.
So it won't change on this side.
There'll be no change.
And number one, Frank, I never got a green card at the council meeting. And last time we spoke, there's supposed to be a green card before the meeting started.
Does Carol, do you have the notifications?
Yeah, I double checked it before the meeting. All the abutters within 100 feet were notified.
For the meeting today?
Well, for the last meeting.
For the last meeting.
Last meeting. Remember, we opened, but we didn't discuss because they asked for a continuance.
Right, and then they were supposed to send us a green card letter, right?
No, they sent
No,
it
they
prior
already
to
did.
that
They
one.
don't send a second one.
Oh, they don't send a second one?
No.
Because at the meeting, we announced the date for the next continuance meeting.
All right, because as I say, we didn't get the one for the first one.
I get one.
Well,
We didn't get one for the first one, for the date.
Okay. All right. I get those things back to us. How long do you think it'll take you to get that information?
Well, it won't take long at all. I could get it to you tomorrow morning. We do have a Board of Health meeting on June 11th. Is there any way you could do a conditioned approval? And assuming you get a satisfactory design of that, I think it's gonna be pretty straightforward. I'm gonna show it, the 2-foot wide, 1.5-foot stone trench, and I'll put spot grades along it, showing that will hold the elevation here of 7.4, sloping back to 6.9. There'll be probably about a 0.5% slope.
Right, you know that we're gonna deal.
That's
All
your
the
right.
more reason to keep the process going and.
That seems reasonable.
Well, I do want to see everything that's on the work that's been done on the house.
Yeah, no, I'll show the sonotubes and the call out the decks being replaced.
And there's also a bunch of sonotubes on the side of the house too.
I don't understand what typically, we don't close until after the Board of Health. So your Board of Health meeting is
June 11th.
Is the 11th.
Yeah.
So the question would be the wetlands line, and are we okay with that?
Sure.
So,
And maybe I can get something from Amy to, maybe Amy can write me something to, or she can just talk to Jen.
That we don't have a problem with the line.
we don't have a problem with the line, but we're gonna wanna see more in terms of what happened with the house or not. So I don't really think that having the Board of Health meeting is an issue, and for some reason the Board of Health comes back with something else, then you don't want us closed, because then you've gotta file again.
Okay.
So my recommendation would be to get everything on the plan that we've discussed. And then go before the Board of Health. Is that good, that's an open meeting for the Board of Health, I
It is,
assume?
yes.
So you're gonna have the opportunity to express your concerns to the Board of Health as well.
I think they're gonna pass the buck on you guys.
Well, and we're gonna take a look at that piece that they have, and we're gonna say, what do we think would be the best solution? I mean, we don't have to weigh in on that at all. I mean, we could just take a look at it and say that the septic system's fine, and you gotta protect the wetlands. That's all our concern is. But we're moving before, and we're doing more than that, and trying to say, is there a way to deal with some of this issue?
I will say, I mean, someday if you guys get a chance, if you guys take a drive-by there.
Yep.
I mean, it's been really dry lately, you know, but I'm gonna tell you that.
Tell you what, I'm gonna be by there in the next day or so with all this rain and take a look at it.
Yeah, I mean,
Alright.
it's dry, but it's like I said, if you look underneath the cellar was full with water. I mean, even the guy that was working there saying, this is insane. He's like, I mean, it's.
Yep.
So, I mean, just take a peek at it.
Okay.
So I'd like to request to continue this to your next meeting, please.
Okay.
I make a motion that we continue 127 Ian Bino to 620 on June 18th.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. It's not that we don't understand, we understand your concerns, and you have to appreciate that somewhere we have to come to something with this, all right? I mean, it would be nice to be able to just say, tear it down and make it go away, but we don't have that authority.
Right, I mean, I
No.
think that the people that did the bought the house, or did the homework before they bought it, you know, you just saw a pretty picture of it.
That's not your choice, it's not ours.
Exactly, I agree.
All right. Okay,
All right, thank you so much.
thank you.
Yeah, have a good night. Good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Difficult one.
Say that name.
Keys?
Forgo.
Keys. No, keys.
Oh, we gotta do keys first. I'm
Yes.
sorry.
That was a tough one.
236 Central Ave. Where am I? On June 4th, and ahead of myself, I just wanted to go over with. On June 4th, 2018, at 6:30 PM, the Town Hall, Scituate Conservation Commission will hold a wetlands hearing under Chapter 131, Section 4 of the Mass General Laws, and Section 30700 Town of Scituate Code of Bylaws regarding the application of David Keys to raise an elevated dwelling on property located at 236 Central Ave, Humrock. Abutters and other interested parties are invited to attend. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Richard Savant. I work with Stenbeck and Taylor. I've got some pictures here of the house that we're going to be talking about. These are all different photos. This is the house that...
I'm sorry, I just wanted to say that I live 2 doors down from this house, and we just make sure it's okay that I'm sitting here. I just wanted to disclose that.
Okay. Can you deal with this impartially?
Yes, absolutely, no problem.
Okay.
Okay. So this is an existing house down at 236 Central Ave in Hummerock. It's on the ocean side. It was severely damaged during the spring storm we had this year, as you can see in the photos. Knocked down the rear of the house, essentially. What this homeowner would like to do is demolish this home and put it on driven wooden piles. As you know, we're out on a barrier beach, we're in a flood zone, we're in a VE 18, on a coastal beach, we've got it all covered there. So, we're proposing a new home in the same footprint, no expansion at all, other than that stairway, which would be required to get from 12 feet off the ground down to the ground, which there isn't one currently.
They don't want to jump?
Well, we talked about that, but we decided we'd go with the set of
They want to
stairs.
jump when they're done.
Yeah. If it's water, they don't mind jumping, but if it's dry, they don't want to jump. So, yes, the only difference with this house is we have an existing seawall that was built out there in 2009. And a concrete patio that's integral to that wall, and it's also integral to the abutters patios. They're all tied together. And you can see in the photos that it held up quite well in the storm. The building didn't, but what needs to happen, or what we feel needs to happen, and what the homeowner would like to happen, is to leave the patios there and leave that section of foundation shown on the site plan. The foundation of the house is also integral to that patio. So if they just tear the whole thing down, the patio loses its, structural element on that side. So they're proposing to saw cut that foundation, leave that section shown on the plan and the patio, and drive piles inside of it, leave that part up. So that's really the only catcher with this one, is they need to do some work to keep that stuff in place to hold everybody together. Beyond that, we're going up to 2 feet above the VE zone with 20 minimum as the top of pile. And again, it's within the same footprint that's there now. He does have a pile plan from Rivermore, which we have. And that's pretty much what they would like to do.
And they're gonna save that structure.
They're not gonna save that.
No, they're gonna.
The seawall.
Seawall, the patio.
Yeah, the seawall and the patio held up quite well. It was really overbuilt when they built it in 2009. The structure is a dumpster queen. It's going away. And just that section of foundation will remain.
You're building a new house with the same foundation.
Footprint, yeah.
Footprint,
Yeah.
on pilings.
Same footprint and
Yeah.
elevation
Right.
22 feet
Yeah.
above.
No, it looks good, as long as we have specific details about what's gonna remain, because we've been down this road before.
Yes, we have. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Walls remaining around
yeah.
the piling.
This is what was supposed to happen on that other one.
I know the one you're
Yeah,
talking
just
about.
Yeah.
the section parallel to the seawall to keep
Everything's
it all from
going
being
except
undermined.
one.
For it.
Everything is going, yeah. Beyond the structure is nothing but cobble. I mean, and the homeowner, there's nothing else that's going to remain, other than what we discussed, and a new structure on wooden piles.
Yeah. Particularly.
Now, do you have to do any particular special work to save those walls?
The structural engineer is going to be working on they have looked at it. Yes, so we'll have to
We would need to
make
know
sure
what
that
that is.
that's,
Yeah, we would need to know.
structurally sound.
We would need to know what that is
Sure.
before it happens.
sure. I mean, he has looked at it. I mean, it's a basement, full basement under there now with a concrete floor and foundation walls that are there.
But the floor would be coming out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Just saw cut and just leave that footing with the wall.
Yeah, the footing will still be in
We would need
place.
to know, see that, wouldn't we? Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think
It won't be long till that'll be backfilled with cobble. behind that
Absolutely.
wall, So,
Which is much better.
yeah, right.
Yeah, won't go anywhere.
It'll go right into the road.
Well, wait a minute. This is where we got into stuff down at Webster
That's what we were
Street.
talking.
Because they left more than they said, that's why I
Yeah.
said, we gotta make sure we specify
It's just
in detail
what's
with
attached
drawings
to
and
the wall.
verbiage. Just the section,
Right.
the seaward-most section parallel to the seawall, that's it.
That's it.
Well, and I
That'll be
would-
in the orders.
Question is as the storms come through and rip it up, I mean, can you condition, like, if it comes up in a storm, did they get to rebuild it? Because it seems like that's, damage, post-storm damage repair, that would be.
It's grandfathered.
Yeah.
They already have a seawall in the
The only reason we allowed that wall to remain at Webster Street is because the people did not elect to tear those houses down. It was a fire, and they lost it. In the cases where people have come in for raise and rebuild, they remove the entire foundation.
Right.
And I think that's what you'd need to deal with here.
But then the patio
But
was black.
that slab is poured into the seawall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
What's the harm? It's in the shadow of the seawall. Water's still gonna flow over it, around it, and it's gonna probably backfill it all with lava anyway.
It will.
Right, but then what's gonna happen is they're gonna come to conservation office after the winter storms, and they're gonna say, we wanna take all the cobble out of there, and
But that's a whole different
No,
issue, whether or not there's a
Actually, you don't
seawall
want
in
to
the
take the
patio.
cobble out, you want to backfill the cobble back there.
Right.
You don't want to remove it.
no, I totally agree, I can just
So
hear
when
the
it's in the
phone ringing,
road,
though.
they'll push it right back under there.
It's gonna reinforce it, if it's in there.
Yeah.
It
And
is.
it's a win-win.
So
It
you
gets
do
it out of the
understand that
street.
better than I would, but.
we'll get you.
Oh,
Is this part of a FEMA grant?
no.
Okay.
No.
Because I'm not sure what FEMA would say, or that, if this were with their funds, whether that wall would get to stay or not.
I mean, this is a barrier beach.
There were no DEP comments of significance.
But this isn't an elevation grant, so it's moved.
It's not, and I think another big part of it, as I know you understand, it's tied in with the neighbors' patios.
Right.
However, it's happened in the past, but they're all tied together.
No,
I-
we do understand.
I know
that.
you've had a
It's
history with similar projects, I understand
a
that.
problem.
Right, right.
Right.
There's several properties that are like this, that have elevated, that have seawalls and have concrete patios.
Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, one of the houses that burned, the first one towards the opening, we allowed them to do this.
Yes, we did.
Yeah. Yeah.
How long ago was that, though?
5 years. Not even.
So has guidance changed in that last 5 years that would,
No, because this is really discretionary. They got a pre-existing seawall, they got a pre-existing concrete patio, and they're just asking you, can we do something to keep this patio from collapsing?
right,
It's grandfathered.
because they have an armored structure in the front of it?
Repair and maintain, yeah.
You remove that and you're gonna take out every patio of all the 6 houses that sit on there.
Demolished.
You can't just remove one in the middle.
And a new one on the same footprint being put on Pine Rise. And my own feeling on the patio and the wall, the reason, I'd be concerned that we would actually be doing more damage by taking it out.
Okay.
Where it's there and has worked, and I do know the area, although I'm not 2 doors away, and I understand how those patios are connected. It's interesting how that was done, to say the least, but it's worked.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So where are we? Well, Lisa, Jen?
I'm good. You're never gonna forget me again.
I'm good with
are
it.
ya?
The big thing I said is this time, learning from past.
Yeah,
It's
it'll be
longer,
in the
really
orders.
specific.
Very
about
specific, that the
what
rest
will
of the
remain and
foundation
only
is
remain.
not.
Like Richard
staying.
said, the basement floor will be gone.
Everything.
All the other walls.
And that will be in the conditions.
That's what he brought up, this, whatever Rivermore put together as
Just
the
to
housing.
make sure.
But you'd understand that better than I
Yeah,
would, Frank.
I get
There's
it.
nothing, there's nothing there that they would wanna leave.
To make sure.
Well, we didn't think they would either down the street, but they
Okay.
did.
All right.
And still do.
Well.
Amy, you want to add
that's,
anything
yeah,
else to this?
Different situation.
No, much.
No, I mean, they're not adding fill, they're not changing grade.
My name's Mark McLaughlin, I'm the abutter next door at 230.
I'm sorry, your name is?
Mark McLaughlin.
Yep, Mark, sorry.
What I was trying to point out.
And your address is what?
234.
Okay.
So, what I was trying to point out to you is this particular wall is going to be a three-sided wall. Because the existing house, the rooms got destroyed, were an addition put on in the early 70s.
Yep.
And then they did that, they moved out like 12 feet, made a three-sided extension. So the existing house sits within that, the old house. So when they do tear out the old house, there will not be a wall, there will have to be three walls.
They have it well documented here, yeah, it's on.
I just, you were bringing up the comment that a wall was gonna remain.
This section. Existing wall.
Right, I know it's an interior
This
wall.
one here.
And like I said, that's, the
It's
seawalls
the house
all
and then that
grew off of
sits
each
in front
other.
of it.
Right.
But no, it goes up.
His was the original,
Just white, that's it.
mine was added afterwards.
Okay.
But his got replaced, so it's actually tied into mine. They pin things together.
So we should tear them all out?
It's
or-
a whole house of It is the house of cards.
Yeah, I got it.
Piece.
I got it. All right, thank you.
And they worked. You
Right.
can see, they're built well.
All right.
Alright. So,
And I'll be dealing with the same
Anybody
thing in a
else?
couple of years.
Okay,
so we can close it.
take a motion to close.
I make a motion to close.
All in favor? Okay.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll take, can I have these structurals? I know I did submit them.
We have a set.
Oh, yeah, here's a
Yeah,
copy.
absolutely.
I've got a copy.
Just want to make sure.
All right, now, Jeff, help me with this last name.
Yeah. What else help me? Joanne Rubisoto?
What is it?
Joanne
Do you want the structural?
There's duplicates.
So now I gotta do the Lisa. This is 2 houses from me, but I see no reason I couldn't be impartial. That's a problem.
6:40 on the Town Hall, Situate Conservation Commission will act on wetlands hearing check.
There's an elevation.
131 section
For the,
49 general laws and section
it's 127A vinyl.
3070. Town of Situate Code of Bylaws regarding the application of Joanne
Fugazotto.
Pagazotto, thank you. The elevated dwelling on property located at 9 Hawthorne Street, Humrock. But there's another interesting parties required to attend.
There you go. Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeff Acid, North Engineering again. This is an NOI to elevate the house at 9 Hawthorne Road. The property is in the FEMA floodplain, zone AE, elevation 13. It's also a barrier beach, and it's also within the 200-foot riverfront area to the South River. The house is going to be lifted up and moved onto the property adjacent, which is in common ownership. That's number 11 Hawthorne Road. They're going to drive wooden piles, I believe there are 23 wooden piles, and then move the same house back into the same location. The first floor will sit at elevation 14, 1 foot above the AE base flood elevation. And again, it'll be in the same location.
Same footprint?
Same footprint, same
You
house.
said that, I'm sorry.
Same house, yeah.
Jack it up.
But they're not
This one
adding
is a
water.
left.
Right.
The only addition would be the steps will have to extend further down.
Where's the septic system for this house, Jeff?
Right here. There's a septic cover here, and the leaching field is in this vicinity.
I'd say it has to go up.
Yeah, it's been flooded multiple times.
Okay.
They must have really had a problem in that January storm when the
Oh,
river
yeah,
was so
yeah,
high.
yeah. But she has several even before.
No, I don't have any problems with this one. Oh, there's Paul Harris.
Yeah, you just said that.
I know.
Hey, I didn't get my notification.
What do you think, Jen? Should we go for it?
I don't know, we should talk about it a lot more.
There's no audience for this, Jeff.
Pat?
I know.
Yeah, where's Pat? Amy, what do you think?
They left, they couldn't wait.
I think it would be a great improvement.
Okay.
Anything like, I make a motion to close.
Second?
All in favor?
Nobody's here.
Do we have any,
That was a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Do we close the Humrock Conservation meeting now?
You know, it's a pretty late.
I don't know, I'm looking at Gardner, border, and vinyl.
What's left?
Yeah, hold your horses, folks.
Yeah, wait a minute.
What's the extension? Drea?
261 Central, requesting 3-year extension. They have a FEMA
Okay.
elevation grant
Thank you.
that they have not acted on yet.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
Motion that we give an extension to 261 Central Ave for 3 years for the elevation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I remember that one. We talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Is that ranch?
Certificate of compliance, Bailey's Island.
Yeah,
We're gonna hold that one.
okay.
Okay.
And then under agents report, I wanted to quickly just review the project Lot 1 Torrey's Lane, which is stormwater application. And so that was,
Yeah.
okay, you remember that?
Yeah.
And anyways, so it went out to peer review, it went back and forth with peer review and the engineer a couple of times, they worked things out. There are 2 outstanding comments that have yet to be addressed. And it seems like, and it's because this would be I think this would now be the 3rd time. Either they don't want to come to an agreement, or they don't meet the stormwater standards. So they're at a crossroads where we would either deny it, or we could issue it with conditions. But the thing about that, which I don't know, which I'm inclined to do, but the only thing is if we do it that way, we really lose the ability to require that the conditions are met, because there's not an oversight mechanism built in, and nor the staff to do that. So, I mean, I thought I'd ask you if you had an opinion.
So we could condition it?
We could condition it,
Or deny it.
or we
Or
could
deny
deny
it,
it, for basically lack of coming to meeting the requirements of the regulations. The regulations set forth requirements that you need to meet, and as designed, it does not. It falls short in two different areas.
What areas are they falling short in?
Okay. They are disagreeing with a rate calculation, and also a condition to observe the fill to make sure that they're in fact in sand. So as I understand it, what they're doing on the lot is they're assuming that the material out there is what exists after you dig out, heat up the topsoil. So they're going with a sand coefficient as opposed to till, which is what you have on the surface. But we're not just talking like 6 inches, we're talking, yeah. So, I mean, so in the realm of stormwater infiltration and calculations for this type of permit, those are the things you're talking about, and those matter.
And why are they having, what's the big hangup? I don't get it. I mean, they're just gonna determine what the material is when they dig it out? and-
Right, they're just going with the assumption that we're not going with what's actually there, but what it's going to be after we dig it out. So, and I believe I forwarded to you the review letter, which explains it in more detail. Exactly, I mean, it's clear there's 2 hang-ups that I think could be resolved by the engineer, but they are kind of at odds, to tell you the truth. So that's why I put out there deny as a possibility. So then I think that they would refile and they would address those for sure. Or maybe they would wait until the stormwater regs were rewritten, and maybe it wouldn't be so onerous to meet the current regs. As I understand it, that's one of the, mindset for some of these single-family homes, is that we're gonna try to lessen the requirement, make it a little bit easier to build on those. So maybe it makes sense for that developer to come in at a later time, I'm not sure, or to meet, he's just gotta give us some more stuff.
Okay.
Anybody?
I don't know why we would condition it if we have no control. Isn't that what I heard you say? If we do that, we really don't have control?
Yeah, we really don't.
That's my opinion.
I agree. So do we vote?
No, I just want your feedback.
Oh.
Or you could vote.
I think we should deny it, and if they want to wait for the new stormwater regs, and if they find them more appealing, and then they agree, then we can move on.
Or maybe you could tell them that our temptation is to deny it and see what they do.
Yes, I like that.
I would prefer that.
Yeah, no, I'd kind of like one more time to try to work it out.
Yeah.
But if you can't, we're gonna end up having to deny it.
All right.
Yeah.
Are we at a time frame or anything with that? Do we have any time?
The time is now. I mean, yeah, basically, we had the peer review results came in.
No, but I mean, are we
Friday.
gonna, is this gonna get constructively approved or something if we
No.
don't? All right.
No, we're in the back and forth.
Okay.
And the last letter that we have from the peer review just clearly documents where we're at odds.
Okay.
So,
That sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, let's see.
see if they come back with anything.
Yeah.
Tell them right now, it looks like it'll get denied unless they can get their act together.
Okay.
Okay. All right, I'd like to make a motion, we accept the minutes of April 23rd as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Are we ready to go home?
I think so. I am.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.